Chapter 1743. In the past years, the organization, although originally composed only of Tauren, began to accept orcs, and the proportion continued to increase. The two races each accounted for half of it. Although the members of the Ring of the Earth were not particularly active in the past years, the Third Battle of the Dark Portal, because of the Archimonde invasion, weakened the barrier of the world of Azeroth, and the activities of the elementals continued to increase. In fact, the Ring of the Earth had never been as important as it was now. The members of the organization worked hard to calm the elementals down to ensure that they would not cause more trouble for Azeroth. Today, the Ring of the Earth brought a very serious alert. The elementals were likely to invade Azeroth and launch attacks on all large intelligent lifeforms. This was not an alarmist, because recently there had been constant reports from patrols that fire elementals, which had never appeared in Durotar, wandered aimlessly from time to time. They attacked livestock and villages, as well as travelers passing by. If that was the case, it would not be worth Sal's anxiety. Wuxia found Sal and said nervously, "There is something you'd better see for yourself. It's not far, just inside Orgrimmar." Under Wuxia's lead, Sal led Varrock and a few guards to sneak into the dark alley area. "Great Chief, here." The one who waved to Sal was one of the few orc thieves in the tribe. Sal recognized him. He was Goddard, who usually worked as a thief trainer in Orgrimmar. Not far from Goddard was the goblin thief Vessi. Under Goddard's guidance, Thrall stepped onto a rough and thick roof. Although the houses of the tribe were not beautiful, they were definitely comparable to the fortresses of the Alliance. A group of people walked on top of a wooden house, and at most, they could hear the creaking sounds. In the natural valley of the dark alley area, the wind that poured into the valley always blew all kinds of sounds from the wooden houses. Vessi pointed downwards. It was not difficult. Sal noticed a troll in a strange dark blue robe, who was giving a speech in a corner of the alley. Dozens of orcs, trolls, and even the rarely seen forgotten ones were surrounding the troll and listening. "The earth is angry. The supreme ancient god will give the most resolute response to the provocation of mortals. The fire elementals hovering outside Orgrimmar are the best sign." One of the residents of Orgrimmar shouted, "I don't want to die." "Doomsayer, what do you tell us?" The one called the Doomsayer spoke in a low and bewitching voice, "People of Orgrimmar. Listen carefully. We have been deceived for too long. I demand that you open your eyes and see the truth." At this point, he raised his arms high. "Brothers and sisters. The end of the world was coming. Azeroth will no longer exist." Following his shout, a faint flame rose from his arms. The surrounding residents were shocked and subconsciously took 2 steps back. However, they realized that the flame did not cause any damage to the Doomsayer. The flame seemed to have become a part of his body. After all, even mages couldn't really let the flames flow on their skin, but this person could. The Doomsday Prophet's voice grew more agitated. "The flames will devour this world. The storm would sweep away all hope. In the end, the elements will rule everything." One of the orcs mustered up his courage and asked, "Why should we believe you?" The Doomsayer pointed a finger with sharp nails at the orc, a fanatical expression on his face. "Soon, you will see the sign I spoke of. When that time comes, do not despair, people of Orgrimmar. Join us and learn the truth." He raised his hands again. "Abandon a life full of war and hard labor, be reborn in the elements, and take your rightful place in the new world." When the guy below said this, Varrock could not help but say, "Great Chief, I will go arrest and hang this guy." "Great Chief, do it. We have already found many of them. If we let them do as they please, Orgrimmar will fall into panic," Goddard said in a low voice. Thrall waved his hand and stopped his most loyal companions and subordinates. "First, monitor and find all the Doomsayers." "Yes, sir," Thrall's subordinates said in unison. Thrall returned to the Wisdom Valley, looking a little lonely. He looked at Wuxia beside him and suddenly said, "There are many of these people in the Alliance, right?" "Many. But it's useless," Wuxia pointed out. Thrall's body trembled. He felt a deep sense of powerlessness and guilt. Whether it was a country or an organization, the more turbulent it was, the easier it was for evil people to come out and stir up trouble. The damn doomsayers could be so popular in the Horde, which had a lot to do with the poor economic situation of the Horde. People living in the abyss of suffering would naturally change. "Am I a bad chief?" Sal seemed to ask Wuxia without thinking. "No. There is no such thing," Wuxia said firmly. He felt a bad sign and immediately realized that he had to nip Thrall's bad idea in the bud. "Great Chief, no, Thrall. No one is more suitable to be the chief than you. This is not just my idea. You can ask most of the people in the Horde, they all love you. The current situation of the Horde is not your fault. Then tell me, why is the gap between the Alliance and the Horde getting wider and wider?" Thrall looked at the dark sky blankly. Wuxia wanted to lie, but he realized that even if it was a white lie, it would not have any effect on the wise and rational chief. He was discouraged. That's the leader of the Alliance, Duke Marcus. That's too much. If it was anyone else, they probably wouldn't be able to achieve such results. Really? It's not that I'm not good, it's that Duke is better. Thrall's mouth was full of bitterness, but more of a sense of loss, for himself and the future of the Horde. Wuxia was right. There were also many Twilight believers within the Alliance. They avoided the main cities of the Alliance and gave speeches in various towns and villages. There were many people who listened, and some even smiled at them. But there was always an inexplicable meaning in every smile. It was not malicious, but people always felt like they were looking at a group of worthless dead people. Most of the Twilight believers shuddered inexplicably. The natural fanaticism and excitement in them quickly cooled down under the gaze. They suddenly had an intuition that they might not be able to easily stir up chaos and recruit believers in the Alliance. Chapter 1744. In the Duke's mansion in Stormwind City, Duke had used close to 100 magic mirrors to turn his mansion's main hall into a control center that was even more powerful than the Alliance's headquarters. The 100 or so images were just the bird's-eye view of the important cities of the Alliance. In each large image, there were a dozen or even hundreds of smaller images attached to it. As long as Duke used his divine sense, he could immediately pull them out and take a closer look. In fact, in Karazhan, which was connected to the weave, Karthika was currently commanding 7 or 8 radiant moons and close to 100 morning rank Einherjars to monitor the situation of the Twilight believers. Most of these Einherjars were Alliance mages who had died after Duque became a demigod. Perhaps it was because their lifespans had come to an end, or perhaps they had died on the battlefield, but they firmly believed that people like them would not be able to go to heaven. Thus, they became Duque's subordinates as Einherjars and became a part of the weave. As a demigod of the weave, Duque was becoming more and more like a god. It was a pity that this demigod, who should have been high and mighty, was doing something that did not match up with him. "I'll just quietly watch you act cool. I've never interrupted you. You can destroy everything in seconds. Your parents are afraid of you." Duque made his 2 daughters giggle as he sang an unreliable song. However, the 2 mothers were speechless. While it was good for daughters to be close to their fathers, they felt that if Duque took care of all the education, the beautiful elf girls would be led astray by Duque before they were even 3 years old. Yes, in theory, these 2 girls were half human and half elf. Because Duke had the body of a demigod, he was able to impregnate the 2 girls, so technically speaking, the 2 little girls should be demigods and half-elves. That made the 2 babies look completely like high elven babies, with no human characteristics at all. What was interesting was that even though Illyria had a head of brilliant blonde hair, Annihilus had silver hair that was almost as white as Sasha's. Atlanta had blonde hair. It could only be said that the genes of the Windrunner family in terms of hair color were clearly divided into two shades, pure gold and pure silver. The only difference was when it was revealed as a dominant gene. Aurelia was worried that if the child didn't resemble Duque, Duque would have a problem with it. Duque didn't think much of it. Of course a girl should resemble her mother. Look at me, compared to the elves, I'm a typical long-waisted, short-legged person. This kind of girl won't be able to charm men when she grows up. After playing with his daughter, Duque looked at his woman's Mount Hyjal, which was obviously a size bigger than before. He bared his teeth and went into work mode. The family left, and an existence that rarely appeared in front of Duque appeared. Greetings, Master. Queen Saloras, who had typical demon goat horns and skin that was even darker purple, knelt on one knee. Duque waved his hand. I'll give you the souls of those scum. Pry something out of Benedettas for me later. With one sentence, he decided the fate of thousands of Twilight believers active in the Alliance. That was the power of the Alliance commander. Saloras was quite excited. This was the first time that Duque had publicly rewarded them with souls. After relying on Duque for so long, the twins were almost suffocated. As for Benedettas, he was indeed dead. But his soul couldn't be freed, and Duque secretly caught it on the spot. The Twilight Hammer didn't have a particularly powerful leader. On the Alliance's side, it was Benedettas, and on the Horde side, it was the two-headed ogre's boss, Gujar. Duque wasn't interested in Gujar. Even if the Alliance got rid of Benedettas, it wouldn't be a problem. After 2 days of observation, Duque finally lost patience with the weak Twilight Hammer. The only thing that Duque cared about was what the trump card of the ancient gods was. In just an hour, Queen Saloras gave the answer, Death Wing, Nesario. It was an unsurprising and unreliable answer. Duke's brows furrowed into a crease. It didn't make sense. The reason was simple, Death Wing had been dead for a long time. If it was still like in history, and Nesario only faked his death to avoid capture, then at this point in time, Death Wing, who had the full support of the only remaining ancient god, was very strong. As the final boss of the Cataclysm, Death Wing, who had been blessed by the ancient gods, was so strong that it even jumped out of the cycle of life. In order to successfully surround and kill Nesario, the other dragons paid a huge price and eventually lost their divine power. However, the Neltharion of this life was obviously not up to the task. The abilities of any death dragon would be greatly reduced. For example, when Malygos turned into a Dracolic, although it preserved his demigod-level spellcasting ability, more than half of the powerful dragon body's power was cut off. This directly caused Duque to stop using magic and switch to melee combat. Not only was Death Wing killed, but even its dragon head was used by Malygos back then. It might have even been used as a chamber pot. Its skin and flesh had been dismantled into parts. Even if the ancient gods resurrected it as a ghost dragon or a bone dragon, its level would be the same. Duque didn't even need to call for help. He could single-handedly kill Nesario in the form of a bone dragon. Moreover, Nesario's soul had already been ruthlessly played by Duque, and then suppressed by the Dragon Sleep Temple. It had long been worn down. Even if Enzos and the other ancient gods still retained a part of Death Wing's soul, it wouldn't be enough. In conclusion, Nesario was definitely not qualified to be a trump card. Duque crossed his legs, rested his chin on his left hand, and tapped the armrest of the chair rhythmically with the index finger of his right hand. He fell into deep thought. Queen Saloras showed a charming smile. She crawled over and gently massaged Duque's calf. Master, have you forgotten something? Go ahead. Duque calmly glanced at the Demoness. The individual of the living and the individual of the undead are not the same concept. For example, abomination. Duque was suddenly moved. Yes. All this while, his thinking had fallen into a blind spot. He had always believed that if the cataclysm was still represented by Death Wing, Nesario, then it must be Nesario as the final boss. He had forgotten. Since he could dismantle Death Wing into parts, the ancient gods could also put these parts back together, and even add more unexpected new parts. Duque stood up and smiled at Saloras. You did well, I'll reward you with this. After saying that, Duque directly threw Thun's tentacle to the Demoness, whose expression had changed drastically. Then, Duque directly called out with his soul, Onyxia, come to me, I have an important task for you. Chapter 1745. Hey, Master, you called me? Onyxia walked briskly into Duque's room. What are you going to do today? The balcony? The bathroom? The hall? Or the kitchen? The black dragon girl who had transformed into Countess Katrana pulled up her skirt seductively, revealing her fair calves. Duque was speechless. It was all his fault. He had tamed too many dragons, and the dragons were tamed. It was just that he was too unscrupulous and used all his tricks. The result was that the scheming dragon who had tried to overthrow Stormwind was turned into a secretary dragon. If there was something to do, he would do it with his mount. Ahem. Duke pretended to be serious and coughed twice, then sternly said, Onyxia, have you realized that you used to dare to argue with anyone? Now, you can't even beat anyone of the same rank? Onyxia's face, which was originally a mix of charm and nobility, suddenly changed. Master. Are you tired of me? A cross-shaped vein appeared on Duque's forehead. No. What I mean is, you are about to see your original fate. The Black Dragon Princess felt her heart suddenly contract violently. In the original future, you and your brother will become the same existence, a zombie dragon. I think it won't be long before you see him again. Onyxia was finally afraid when Duque mentioned Nefarian. She knelt on the spot and prostrated in front of Duque. Thank you for your pity, Master. Duque did not comfort her anymore. The pity of a true demigod is never cheap. You can only obtain my pity because you have at least given your loyalty. That's right. It was already a miracle to make a powerful black dragon, who was originally insidious and cunning, give her loyalty. In the end, Duque was still a little disappointed and wanted to give her a warning. She also knew that she was lazy and lacked motivation. She thought that she could rely on her natural demigod body to survive. Now it seemed that Duque was not satisfied. I will work hard in the future. In the past, I treated you as my mount mainly because I was worried and because of my vanity. After being conferred as a god for so long, I'm also indifferent to it. Azeroth and the Burning Legion would eventually have a decisive battle. When the time comes, you'll have to take charge. Duque paused. You've proven your loyalty. It's time to prove your courage. Courage? Originally, the Black Dragon didn't need any courage. After all, black dragons were already at the top of the Azeroth food chain. If there was anything that Onyxia was afraid of, it would be her father, Nesario. Hearing Duque's words, Onyxia shivered instinctively. But she soon calmed down again. Perhaps her father was indeed very strong and crazy. So what? If Master can kill him once, then she can kill him a second time, a third time, countless times. Onyxia didn't know why she came to such a magical conclusion. Obviously, she had become confident. She shouted in her heart, yes. My master holds the fate of the entire Azeroth in his hands. He is the god of fate. There is no existence that can compete with the god of fate. Even my once invincible father can't do it. Thinking of this, the look in her eyes changed from confidence to incomparable determination. Master, I won't let you down. After saying that, like a docile cat, she took Duque's left hand, rubbed it on her smooth face, and then left. Duke's gaze sharpened as he watched Onyxia's silhouette disappear into the distance. His gaze seemed to transcend time and space, across the plane barrier, and saw the earth elemental plane, in the isolated temple in the stony continent, a certain fallen guardian dragon that had long been torn apart. The wings of death alone could no longer cause any trouble. Duque clearly remembered that Nefarian's corpse had disappeared. There was a moment when, under the hint of Queen Saloras, Duque almost thought that Zoth wanted to mess up the Wings of Death family. For example, Nefarian's body, and then the heads of Nethario and his wife. Something like a three-headed dragon, that was quite cute. It was also very cool. Duque soon felt that this was not reliable. It was very simple. If they really played the three-headed dragon as one, then whose body would be the main one? The Wings of Death's body had long been reduced to ashes, leaving only the dragon head that was relatively intact. Whether it was Nefarian or Sinestra, there was an absolute difference in size compared to the Wings of Death's body. If either of their bodies were used as the torso, it would only be a weakening, not a strengthening. Such a method of neglecting the essentials was not advisable. If Zoth really did this, Duque would be very happy to get rid of Nethario again and enjoy the greatest dragon-slaying achievement alone. Now, Nethario was waiting quietly, brewing his hatred for Duque and all the low-level creatures on the surface, waiting for the time to use the fire of resurrection to devour the world again. Wasn't Duque already set up everything and waiting for Nethario to deliver himself to him? Make your move, I can't wait anymore. As in history, the first to make a move was the Twilight Church. On the Alliance's side, although Duque had long used the magic net to monitor the movements of many Twilight believers, Saloras had interrogated Benedettas, the leader of the Twilight Church in the Alliance, and obtained a more detailed and high-level list. The Alliance's purge of the Twilight believers went quite smoothly. The Alliance's internal economy and people's livelihood were good, so there was no place for the Doomsday Church to spread. Coupled with the Alliance's decapitation strategy, the Twilight Riot on the Alliance's side ended before it even started. Many people did not even know that the Twilight believers had been killed. Instead, they were surprised by the Alliance's military control. Occasionally, elemental creatures began to attack the Alliance's main cities, but, did they really think that Duque's arrangements were for nothing? There were 4 guards of the Alcafon's treasury, plus 2 Odal guardians. If there were so many powerful beings in charge, the Alliance's main cities would still be able to overturn the sky with elemental creatures. In that case, Duque would not be able to survive. Compared to the peace of the Alliance, the Horde was in a terrible situation. Sal wanted to cast a net and wait for the Twilight believers to contact the higher-level core figures so that he could catch them all in one fell swoop. Unexpectedly, perhaps the death of Benedettas had triggered the nerves of the twin-headed ogre Google. Google had actually made his move ahead of time. When Thrall heard Orgrimmar's alarm and rushed out of the great chief's palace, he was shocked to see that Orgrimmar stood in the middle of the mountains. Amidst the scattered mountains, he could see no less than 30 giant portals. Countless fire elemental creatures rushed out and wantonly destroyed everything in Agrima. Chapter 1746. No, Sal shouted subconsciously. Agrima was the fruit of his hard work for more than 10 years. From the time he led the enslaved orcs to the uprising in Goldenhold Castle, to crossing the Endless Sea to the Kalimdor continent despite the encirclement of both the humans and the Scourge army, he led the tribe from a pitiful 100,000 people to the present day, with several main warring races and over 3 million people. Agrima was the testimony of the tribe's unyielding glory. Seeing Agrima being swallowed by the sea of fire, Sal felt as if his heart was being cut by a knife. He used to think that using wood as the main building material for the city was a great feat in line with the orc tradition and aesthetics. He still remembered that in the 15th year of the Dark Portal, Thrall had ordered Grom Hellscream to bring his Warsong clan to the Grey Valley in order to have enough wood to build a city. He didn't hesitate to start a war with the Night Elves to snatch the wood. Who knew that 11 years had passed? At this moment, Sal could not wait for the orcs to improve. For example, they could learn from the Alliance and build the whole city with bricks and cement like Stormwind City. Wood is the best kindling material. Why don't you burn the cement with fire? What made Sal's heart hurt the most was the behavior of the people of Agrima. At the entrance of the Wisdom Valley not far away, Sal saw with his own eyes an Agrima guard rush to the violent fire elemental creatures. He did not fight the invaders bravely with his battle axe, but knelt down and worshipped them. Great elements! I beg you, accept me and let me have a place in the new world ruled by the elements. Obviously, this guard had been brainwashed by the Twilight believers. Ah! The guard had clearly screamed and turned into a lump of charcoal, but the Twilight believers were still crazily advocating, he has been accepted by the elements. He has become a part of the fire. More and more people of Agrima began to believe the Twilight Church's words. This was a sign. The world would be destroyed by the fire. They no longer resisted, no longer united. Instead, their minds wavered as they did not know if they should join the ranks of the Twilight believers. The elements are going berserk. We must appease them immediately. Otherwise, Agrima is finished. A member of the Ring of Earth shouted. It sounded, in a way, rather pedantic to Dworkin. Whoever dares to attack our main city will be attacked. This was the right way to handle things in the tribe. Unfortunately, he could not do it. The Horde was not the Alliance. They did not have the brick houses of the Alliance, nor did they have a complete fire system. With most of the Forsaken on their knees, and even an Astrian who had returned was ordered to meditate in isolation, the Horde lacked mages. Furthermore, there was no weave that could provide an endless supply of mana to mages. With the shaman's way of doing things, pacifying the violent fire elemental creatures was the only choice. Elula, Balala. The shamans shook their heads, using incantations and postures that were similar to dancing to communicate with the rampaging fire elements. Although it seemed unreliable, the effect was obvious. Destroy. Destroy. Burn everything to ashes. Burn. Burn. The shamans heard the voice of the fire elementals. Thrall and all the shamans in Orgrimmar tried their best to calm the elements, but only a small portion of them were able to calm down. Great Chieftain, no. We can't hold on much longer, cried Varrock pessimistically. That was because more than a third of the buildings in the city had been burned. Even though all the beams and pillars of the main buildings had been fireproofed. Unfortunately, that level of fireproofing was still useless in the ultra-high temperature. Seeing that the city would fall into a sea of fire and turn into ruins, Thrall finally couldn't take it anymore. That's right, he had one last trump card. Ever since he returned to Nagrand and learned the path of shamanism under the guidance of Gayan's grandmother, Thrall had been able to impose his will on the elements after awakening his senses and power of nature from a warrior who only knew how to hack and slash. The problem was that it was a kind of slavery equivalent to the warlocks enslaving demons. This went against the tenet of the Ring of Earth. However, seeing that the entire Orgrimmar was about to be destroyed, Thrall finally couldn't take it anymore. In the name of nature Shaman Guile, I command all fire elementals to stop your attacks. When his surging spiritual power spread across the entire Orgrimmar with him as the center, he could clearly feel the resistance of the fire elementals. Refuse. Non-elemental creatures should be destroyed. We will not take orders from a non-elemental. A tear fell from the corner of Thrall's eye. I command you, stop. In the spiritual world, Thrall's voice was like thunder from the ninth heaven. Every fire elemental seemed to have heard the absolute command from the fire elemental lord, Ragnaros. Even though they were unwilling, they still stopped and stood where they were. It stopped. Sal panted heavily. He had used his own power to force the elements to submit. This method had succeeded, but he was not happy at all. Thrall looked into the distance and felt the resistance of the elements. For the first time, he had a deep feeling: the shaman's power seemed to no longer be able to summon and control the violent elements. Thrall had an idea. At this moment, in Iron Stove Castle, the dwarves were engaged in a small-scale offensive and defensive battle. The dwarves had brought a large number of cannons, ranging from direct 88mm cannons to curved mortars. In their own way, the dwarves destroyed the earth elemental creatures attacking Iron Stove Castle. As the most thick-skinned of the four major elements, the tenacity of the earth elemental creatures greatly exceeded Magni's expectations. Fortunately, there was Rock Warden Alkavan here. This 10-story-tall supergiant did not even need to make a move. He sat in front of the Iron Stove Castle, which seemed incomparably majestic to mortals. No earth elemental could break through his line of defense. Almost every earth elemental that came within 100 meters of his body would immediately prostrate on the ground and acknowledge Alkavan as their supreme ruler. Magni complained at the side, "Oh my god, what the hell are these earth elementals up to?" Although Duque informed us that it was likely that the former Nesario was conspiring to destroy all of Azeroth, is this really Nesario's doing? Or is even the Earth Elemental Lord involved in this damned attack? Alkavan shook his huge head. There is no doubt that Therazane, the Mother of Stone, is a powerful existence, but she is the most peaceful of the Elemental Lords. She is very patient and has great love for the creatures that live on the earth, and likes to spend relaxing time with the creatures that nest on her. She is at war with the other Elemental Lords. I don't think she would participate in an attack that would destroy the world. Chapter 1747. If the Stone Mother doesn't come out, who will? Magni answered his own question. Let me think. Ragnaros will definitely come out. His grudge with Duque. Ha ha. But if he comes, it won't be my turn to deal with him. Duque will take care of it himself. As a creation of the Titans who had participated in that shocking ancient war, as well as a guardian who had lived in this world for more than 25,000 years, Archaevon himself was a living history book. Perhaps it was the Wind Elemental Lord Al-Vakir. As for the Tidehunter Neptulin, it's hard to say. Then what can I do? Magni continued his analysis. Sylvanas will probably be in charge of the Wind Elemental. She'll be looking for Al-Akir to snatch the authority of the Wind Elemental. As for the Water Elemental, it definitely won't be my turn. Most likely Vashj will be in charge. Archaevon said in a low voice, now, the spatial barrier between the four major elemental realms and Azeroth is already very weak. It's not surprising that the ancient gods would encourage the elemental lords to participate in the attack on Azeroth. Since the Alliance has such a leader with foresight and made arrangements in advance, I suggest that you think of a way to increase your strength. Then I suggest that you think of a way to increase your strength. I'm already at the peak of mortal strength. Magni was a little embarrassed. As a legendary heroic warrior, his strength in the mortal world could no longer increase. Then cross the line between humans and gods. Magni, you have the talent. Archaevon encouraged the Dwarf King. At this moment, Muradin interrupted, yes. Brother, think about it. The Burning Legion, the ancient gods, I feel that the enemies we have to face are getting stronger and stronger. The next time Jaden comes, he might not be weakened. But it will take a long time. I'm an earth elemental, and it takes a lot of time for us to level up. And I still have my duty as a king. Magni hesitated. At the mention of this, both Muradin and Belang shut up at the same time. The matter of royal power had always been taboo. Alkavan, however, didn't feel this way. This overseer giant didn't sense the change in the atmosphere at all. He continued to speak bluntly, think about it. There is an opportunity right now. If Nesario was the culprit behind this cataclysm, in that case, it couldn't stay in the deep rock continent forever. Once it comes out, there will be a vacuum period for your soul to float into the deep rock continent and undergo the final test. It had to be said that Magni was tempted. The brothers and all the dwarves trusted Duque. This did not mean that they would accept being in a weak position in the alliance. Now the elf was ahead of them. Regardless of whether it was the blood elf Queen Sylvana's status as a demigod or Tyron's status as an oracle, the elves had a lot of say in the alliance. Moreover, the two leaders of the elves were Duque's women. With such a close relationship, be it the night elves or the blood elves, their positions in the alliance were incomparably firm. If Magni could become a demigod, then the dwarves' political status would undoubtedly be greatly enhanced. Different statuses and different situations determined that even the same person would make different decisions. If this was the original history, Magna, who had no idea what was going on, would have sought to harmonize with the earth when he saw the four elements going berserk. In the end, without leaving any so-called will or arrangements, he turned into a sturdy stone statue. This caused the Iron Furnace Castle to fall into serious political chaos. In the end, his daughter, Moira Bronzebeard, stole power as the acting queen of the Black Iron Dwarves. Even after Magni returned as a demigod, he couldn't change the fact that Moira was the leader of the three dwarves. It was just that Moira saw the situation clearly and cleared her name. That was the end. In this life, the situation was naturally different. Muradin. Muradin was suddenly called out by Magni, and was a little stunned. If the opportunity that Alcavan mentioned really appears, I will give it a try. When that time comes, the Iron Furnace Castle will be handed over to you. Muradin, you will be the next king. Magni wasn't an idiot. When he challenged Alcavan, Duque had already made arrangements. Even if Duque didn't say it, he knew that Duque didn't like Moira. For example, he was just conflicted about Moira, but Duque was basically targeting him. In this current situation, if Moira really came to inherit the throne of the Iron Furnace Castle, it would definitely be the nightmare of the Bronzebeard dwarves. Duque had been at the helm of the alliance for 11 years, and had already integrated the entire alliance's economy. A country without any specialties or special relationships with a few rich countries would only be marginalized. Take the current Stromgard for example. Although the alliance supported the reconstruction of the torrential castle, without large amounts of funds and project support, this once only birthplace of a human empire in history would still be like a stone by the roadside, dispensable. In comparison, Rotterdam was once almost destroyed. More than half of the land was rotted by natural disasters, and was covered in plagues. But with Kalia's connections, the Marcus family, Alterac family, and Kurtira's family worked together. In addition, Tyrande almost pulled all the Cenarian Circle druids over to work. In 10 years, they forcefully rebuilt the ruined Rotterdam into a top country in the alliance. Hence, with the combination of internal and external factors, Magni almost didn't hesitate to choose his second brother to be the next king. At this moment, Muradin was also dumbfounded. Wait. Big brother, I'll be the regent. Just like Bolivar Fortigen. Nonsense. We dwarves don't have so many things that are not straightforward. Since Moira isn't suitable, and third brother always wants to go on adventures, then there's no difference between you being king and me. Furthermore, my goal is to become the world's strongest warrior and blacksmith. Instead of letting our brethren worry about a king who might fail to become a demigod, it's better to let go of this burden early. Even if something happens in the future, the impact won't be that bad. Looking at his big brother who was fuming with anger, Muradin also understood. For the dwarves, this was indeed the best way to deal with it. Becoming a demigod was not without risks. On the contrary, the risks were unimaginably high. If Muradin really died, then the death of a king or the loss of a prince would have a greater impact on the country and its people. On the other hand, if Muradin stepped down, once he succeeded in becoming a demigod, that leverage could still be added to the dwarves. The dwarves were all hot-tempered. As long as they made up their minds and the other party didn't accept it, they would most likely use their fists to make the other party accept it. Chapter 1748. Second brother, what are you hesitating for? Big brother has made a decision. And between you and me, there's no need to say who is more suitable. Bulang also persuaded Muradin. Okay. When Big Brother decides to promote, I will take over as king. Without further ado, Muradin agreed. That's my good brother. The three Bronzebeard brothers laughed, put their arms around each other's shoulders, and ran off to drink. The alliance, which had been prepared for this cataclysm, could be said to have dealt with the rampaging elements without much effort. The magic net throughout the alliance was the best surveillance and command system. Developed railway transportation and huge air fleets determined the mobility of the alliance's forces. Almost all large-scale elemental riots were suppressed at the first instance. The fire demon troops led by Majordomo Executus, who was loyal to Duque, performed blindingly in this commotion. The fire elementals were setting fires, and he and his fire demons caught fire elementals as easily as hunting in the zoo. They could suppress fire elementals with a wave of their hands. Fire elementals were setting fires everywhere. The fire demons also absorbed all the fire elementals into their bodies. The fire demons were also fire elementals. For them, fire was the same thing as food and water for humans. They didn't even need fire engines, they just ate all the flames and called it a day. Without the most destructive fire elementals, the remaining wind elementals were not so destructive. Since Duque took charge in the alliance, he began to vigorously promote the use of reinforced concrete to build houses. In order to prevent the red bricks from destroying the arable land, Duque had created the hollow bricks early on. The biggest intention of doing this was to speed up the industrialization of the entire alliance. Incidentally, in order to make most cities in the alliance use reinforced concrete as building materials, Duque even subsidized countries in the name of the alliance so that the cost of building a concrete house was about the same as a wooden house. Now, the power of the concrete house was completely highlighted. Not only was it warm in winter and cool in summer, but it was also waterproof and leak-proof. Now the fire was coming, huh? It won't burn. It's windy, huh? It won't blow. If it was the previous wooden house, even if it was a brick and wood house, who knew how many people would die now? And how many citizens would be homeless? Oh my God! Too amazing. My house was set on fire by a few fire elementals the size of carriages. In the end, only the kitchen was burned. There was a strong wind at my place, and even the cows were blown away. Our whole family hid under the bed at home, but the wind didn't even blow the roof away. Concrete houses are amazing. Almost every affected area of the alliance praised Duque's virtuous policies. In fact, Duque was also busy, connecting all his subordinates through the weave. Majordomo, Majordomo. Make sure you have men stationed at every major alliance granary. Which granary burned? I'm going to skin him alive. Majordomo bowed in acknowledgement. Saffron, have your men patrol the skies above a few of the famous forests. Elven Forest, Tirisful Woodland, Hillsbrad Hills, Hinterlands, Grey Valley, Fellwood Forest. Every forest must have at least 100 ice dragons. After enduring for so long, Saffron, who had finally regained some consciousness, spoke in the human language, understood. After killing Lich King Arthas, the soul of the blue dragon that had been bound by Frostmourne was freed. Apart from a few who still chose to follow Wuther, most left. About 2/3 of the blue dragons chose to let their souls go back to sleep in the Dragonbone Waste. A third chose to follow Saffron, letting their souls become a part of the weave. In a sense, Duke's ability to rally supporters was mostly due to his status as a demigod. If there was a day in the future when Duke became a true god, then they would also rise with him. At the very least, they would become true god envoys. After following Duke, these ice dragons were no longer pure undead dragons. They appeared in the sky as frost elemental dragons. Duke had an air force directly under him. Although this air force consumed a lot of elemental power, it was still a direct force. And other than the undead, where else could he find an air force that could patrol the mountains and forests 24 hours a day? Suddenly, Duque felt that he was very shameless. Why did he trick a bunch of people, dragons, to work for him for free? Compared to the benefits, the crisis in front of him felt more real. Considering that in history, after a certain wing jumped out, he specially flew to Stormwind City, demolished the King's Valley, destroyed the statues of several heroes, and destroyed the beautiful garden area with his tail. Duque was very unhappy. What if history repeats itself this time? The garden area was destroyed, like a scar, forever branded on the beautiful Stormwind City. If Nesario tilted his tail and destroyed Duque's alma mater, the Royal Mage Academy of Stormwind City, that would be a slap in the face to Duque. Therefore, Duque directly transferred Naxxramas to the airspace of Stormwind City. It was to set up an earthquake relief headquarters in Stormwind City for the upcoming cataclysm. According to Duque's judgment, the southern continent would be the main disaster area. With such a grand reason, no one would be able to say the word no. Duque had long taken advantage of the outbreak of the elemental disaster to evacuate many areas. No one doubted Duque's judgment. After so many years, Duque's wisdom and greatness had long been deeply engraved in the hearts of every Alliance citizen. Because it was an early evacuation, it was not too urgent, and the people still had time and opportunity to pack up. The Alliance also announced that they would start collecting donations to support the people in the affected areas with the dual power of the people and the government, so that they could choose another place to rebuild their homes. This kind of early disaster relief work that could minimize the loss of life and property was unanimously praised by the Alliance from top to bottom. Thank the heavens, the commander of the Alliance is actually a demigod familiar with the elemental domain. The Alliance is so lucky. I'm starting to understand why every queen in the Alliance fell in love with His Excellency Duke Marcus. If it were me, I'd marry him too. Equal wife is equal wife. Everyone praised Duque like this. As an idol commander who was worshipped by thousands, Duque was extremely annoyed. That's right, the post-cataclysm map in his mind had already overlapped with the current map of the Alliance in his spiritual world. He had also taken precautions. The problem was, earthquake prediction was not something that could be done in Azeroth. Even on Earth, where technology and civilization were very advanced, it was a big problem of the century. Seismologists had spent a whole century and had yet to achieve accurate predictions. Why could Duque do it with his memory? What if it was shaken askew? Chapter 1749. Those in power should never put all their eggs in one basket unless they were in dire straits. So what Duque could do was not only avoid the most dangerous areas, evacuate the people and soldiers to relatively safe areas, but also expand the area. For example, Duque clearly remembered that in the game, the Northshire Abbey in the human novice zone, across the river on the east bank was originally a field full of wolves. However, this area would be completely scorched during the cataclysm. Should people and belongings be evacuated to the Northshire Abbey? Of course not. The evacuation had to be expanded to cover the entire elven forest. Similarly, in the Western Wilderness, now renamed the Western Wilderness, near the Gold Coast Mine, there would be a mini-volcano called Earthly Rage Fissure. Duque had personally inspected it, and the geological conditions there were indeed relatively weak. It was also a priority area for evacuation. However, people could not be gathered in the Sentinel territory or Moon Creek town. If possible, when the cataclysm arrived, it was best to evacuate everyone and their families to the vast fields. Only then could they avoid being wiped out altogether. As for the most valuable works of art or important personnel, they would be brought to the two floating cities, the Dalajan and Naxxramas. At the same time, large amounts of food and water were stored on them. If necessary, the two floating cities would be used as the Apocalypse Ark. Duque frowned as he listened to the reports coming in from all over the world. 80% of the evacuation has been completed. The rest will be completed in 3 days, Khadgar reported. Duque asked Wuxia in the magic mirror, what about the reaction of the people? Thanks to Master's benevolent governance and trust in the Alliance, it is generally calm. There are no panic buying everywhere. 89% of the people have been settled in the refuge area, and food and water have been prepared for 15 days. Duque turned to Kudrin and asked, what about the Air Force? They have been dispersed. We have also prepared for the worst. If the weave is temporarily cut off, we will restore the traditional communication between the Griffins and the flying warships. The old beacon tower has also been built. At this time, Tyrion Fordring suggested, then, Duque, since you can predict the general location of the catastrophe, why don't you tell me? Should we also give the tribe a copy of the information about the changes in the terrain you foresee? Duque fell silent. He closed his eyes and thought for a full 5 seconds before nodding. Okay. The integrity of a paladin was a virtue. Unfortunately, this virtue was destined to only be possessed by a few people. A true leader would never be so selfless. However, Duke didn't mind giving Theon face and giving Thrall a final gift. If the historical trend of the tribe could not be reversed, then Sal's days as the great chief had already entered the countdown. To be honest, Duque didn't need to rely on the cataclysm to trick the tribe. The tribe's territory was barren to begin with, so most of the areas were sparsely populated. In the area controlled by Kalimdor's tribe, there wasn't a single city that would be destroyed by the cataclysm. On the contrary, there was a lack of resources in a wide area. When the Alliance's message reached Thrall, he was stunned for a long time. He forcibly suppressed the riot of the fire elements. 1/5 of Orgrimmar had been burned. When he angrily ordered those Twilight believers to be hanged 1,000,000 times, he had no choice but to deal with the devastation of the mess. Hundreds of logging requests were sent to his desk. He knew very well that if he really asked the Alliance for wood according to the demands of this group of animals, the Night Elves would probably go crazy and start a war on the spot. Who knew that in Duque's handwritten letter, he personally informed them that this was probably just the beginning. The western part of Durantal was likely to be flooded by the surging River of Wrath. The Thousand Needles area and the Shining Plains were also likely to be flooded. If this was a nightmare, Thrall would rather he had never fallen asleep. This was really too terrifying. Just as the Alliance had already made preparations, the tribe was waiting for the judgment of the end to come. In the underground palace of the deep rock continent in the Earth Elemental Plane, a violent voice that resounded through the entire underground world abruptly rang out. Pain. Suffering, my hatred burns in the abyss. If Duque was here, he would definitely recognize the owner of this voice on the spot, Deathwing Nisario. In this special plane far away from the world of Azeroth, non-Earth elemental creatures without the protection of special energy or Earth elemental magic would be crushed to death by the tide of soil in an instant. Because there was no sky and no water here. There was only endless soil and violent lava rising from time to time. Nisario, who was once extremely arrogant and betrayed the entire dragon race, was now just a pile of broken dragon remains. A hollow dragon head, a spine that only had half of its spine left, a pile of ribs that were broken into at least 3 pieces, and an incomplete tail and claws. The so-called Deathwing was now just a joke. Beside Deathwing, there was another huge dragon corpse. That was the corpse of his son who smashed Nefarian. Countless illusory octopus-like tentacles stretched out from the void. Too weak. Too weak. Nesario, you're really too weak. That was the voice of the ancient god Enzos. My master, for the sake of my hatred, give me another chance. Nesario, who was once extremely arrogant, was now just a grandson. This is really the last chance. Enzos let out a cold laugh. A piece of spine suddenly appeared in the void. It looked like the spine was already as big as a small mountain, dozens of times bigger than Nesario's entire dragon when he was alive. If it was also a dragon, wouldn't it be thousands of times bigger than Nesario? However, Nesario felt a trace of familiar aura from that huge bone. Familiar? Are you touched? It is precisely because you defeated it that you, the 5 great dragon aspects, have achieved 25,000 years of glory. Enzos laughed sinisterly. Neltharion suddenly remembered, and his soul exclaimed, Galakrond. That's right, it's Galakrond's bone. It was an era when there were no dragons. A group of progenitor dragons lived on the land of Azeroth. They were the most primitive dragons. They did not have the wisdom and strength of dragons, and were just a group of ordinary beasts that preyed on other animals for their own survival. However, due to some unexplained reason, some dragons had a certain level of wisdom and could communicate in primitive languages. They could also consciously cooperate to hunt. Among them were the grey dragon Nesario, the red dragon Alexstrasza, the light yellow dragon Izura, the blue dragon Malygos, the brown dragon Nozdormu, and the golden dragon Talonixia. And Galakrond, the giant progenitor dragon that was later known as the father of all dragons, also lived in that era. Chapter 1750. Unlike other progenitor dragons, Galakron had relatively high intelligence and strength. His body was also hundreds of times larger than ordinary progenitor dragons. Although his big mouth could swallow an progenitor dragon in one bite, he still fed on fish and other land creatures. The other progenitor dragons were only afraid of his size and strength, but they were fine. However, some dead but still mobile progenitor dragons began to appear in the world. Their bodies were still rotting, and they had no consciousness, only endless hunger and the desire to attack. It was Galakron who killed and devoured a large number of progenitor dragons. After eating for a period of time, Galakron would vomit out all the progenitor dragons that he had eaten. Those progenitor dragons began to move after Galakron sucked away all their life aura and vomited them out, becoming new undead dragons. They attacked and even ate other progenitor dragons. The fearful slaughter naturally attracted resistance. Under the leadership of Talonixia, a large female progenitor dragon who had a crazy desire for victory but lacked strength, a large number of progenitor dragons gathered. She first isolated the infected progenitor dragons and created a collapse to kill them. Then, she led the remaining progenitor dragons to fight against Galakron. Unfortunately, Talonixia's uprising failed, and even she was torn into two by Galakron. Nesario and the other 4 progenitor dragons who would become dragon aspects in the future worked together to cover the retreat of the other progenitor dragons. After the battle, the progenitor dragons were greatly injured, and the number of surviving progenitor dragons were few. In despair, the Titan Guardian, Tyr, who was later in charge of guarding Oder, appeared. He chose and assisted Malygos and the other 5 progenitor dragons. After Malygos felt Tyr's powerful strength, he formed an alliance with Alexstrasza, Nozdormu, Izura and Nesario to challenge Galakron. However, in the battle, the 5 progenitor dragons could not cause fatal damage to the larger Galakron. As Tyr's battle plan only used himself as the core of the battle and did not guide the 5 progenitor dragons to cooperate reasonably closely, Tyr's arm was bitten off by Galakron during the battle. His warhammer was also knocked away, and the divine weapon at Tyr's waist was swallowed by Galakron. Malygos and Alexstrasza rescued Tyr and quickly retreated to a frozen wilderness in the north, later known as Northren's Dragonbone Wilderness. Soon after, the final battle between the 5 ancestor dragons and Galakran started in the sky above Noscent. In order to save Malygos, Neltharion went to face the undead dragon legion alone. Alexstrasza, her sister Isera, and Nozdormu attracted Galakran's attention. Malygos successfully threw the boulder into Galakran's throat. Galakran had difficulty breathing due to the blockage in his windpipe, and in the end, he choked to death. This ancient history was forever imprinted in the hearts of the 5 dragon aspects. Even when Nesario died and his soul was torn apart, he did not forget it. This was because Galaklan was the root of the progenitor dragon. It represented the strongest of the progenitor dragons and also represented the beginning of all mutations. After the 5 progenitor Wyrms defeated Galakran, who was thousands of times larger than them, Tyr introduced them to the Titans who visited Azeroth. The Titans also gave the 5 progenitor dragons the responsibility and power of the dragon aspects. This allowed them to transform from the most primitive beast-like dragons into dragons with extraordinary powers. It also shaped and evolved into the 5 major dragon clans of today. In a sense, Galakran was the original Dragon King. It was precisely because of the overthrow of his reign of death and terror that the glory of Nesario and the other dragons came. It was unknown why Galakran suddenly fell into madness. However, Nesario was very clear about what Galakran became after devouring too many progenitor dragons. It was a giant beast that was like a mountain. Countless eyes and dragon claws appeared on its gigantic limbs and body. Even in the eyes of today's aesthetics, it was still a monster among monsters. Nesario did not care how Zoth dug out Galakran's huge skeleton from the north of the Red Jade Dragon Sanctuary in the Dragonbone Wilderness. He was just instinctively afraid that he would go down the same path as Galakran. However, Zotha's words shattered all his hesitation. "Stupid Nesario! What do you have to lose now? You are worthless if you can't serve me." Worthless meant that there was no need for him to exist. Nesario absolutely believed that an existence as cunning and insidious as Zoth would definitely destroy him completely, or force him into submission, just like how he had used the whispers of the ancient gods to destroy his mental defenses back then. "I agree. As long as I can take revenge on my brothers and sisters who deserve to die 10,000 times. Oh. And that despicable and shameless Duke Marcus, it doesn't matter what I become to vent the endless anger in my heart." Nesario's soul roared, and his withered dragon head trembled continuously. "Yes. That's right." Zoth sneered. This sinister laughter reverberated in the underground palace of the Deep Rock continent. In the void, countless illusory octopus-like tentacles stretched out and hooked Nesario's dragon head. They extracted something from the withered dragon head. Then, like a millstone, the hundreds and thousands of savings grinded Galakran's spine into powder round by round. When the deathly pale dragon's pine bone powder was stirred by Enzo's tentacles into a small mountain of paste, all of the paste was poured into a corpse that had been placed in the deepest pit of the temple for a long time. It was the corpse of Nesario's son, Nefarian. Nefarion's dragon head was like a chicken head that had been chopped off by a kitchen knife, and was directly taken away by the tentacles. A few tentacles placed Nesario's dragon head on Nefarion's neck. Suddenly, a black paste gushed out of Nefarion's neck and turned into thousands of small tentacles that respectfully welcomed Nesario's dragon head onto his neck. Under the pull of that pitch-black power, Yang Qi's body trembled. The dragon head and body that originally belonged to different individuals were forcibly fused together. However, because of the difference in their original sizes, Nesario looked very strange at the moment, just like the cartoon dolls that Dumuk had seen before he transmigrated. It was quite ridiculous. The next moment, a mutation occurred. The dragon body that was originally smaller suddenly made a crisp sound of bones exploding. Kalalala. At first, it was only the sound of frying beans, but towards the end, every explosion sounded like the beating of a drum. The Twilight believers around the temple were all so shocked that they covered their ears in pain. At a speed visible to the naked eye, the dragon body that once belonged to Nefarian began to swell like a balloon. Chapter 1751. Gifts from the ancient gods had never been anything good. The ancient gods, who were monsters themselves, had no sense of beauty to speak of. In the ancient war, the elegant and beautiful high elves in the eyes of mortals had all turned into hateful Nagas. As soon as Nesario's soul was injected into this new body, he felt a terrifying pain that penetrated the deepest part of his soul. Roar! The hard dragon skin on the claws that already belonged to him burst open. The scales on his skin were almost shattered. After the scales were removed, new biological tissues were being revived under Zotha's evil divine spells in the hole full of rotten flesh. However, there was no way to expect anything to happen. What regenerated in the hole were not dragon scales, but a large number of tiny eyeballs, small dragon claws, dragon arms, and even wings. Ow! 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 Nesario could feel his vision splitting into countless parts. These were not the compound eyes of a fly, but the vision of the eyes that burst out from every corner of his body. They were all haphazardly pieced together. That feeling made him go completely crazy. He tried to open his limbs and vent his pain with destruction, but he was shocked to find that the limbs that once belonged to Nefarian were all locked by huge, unknown metal shackles. Countless illusory tentacles came crashing down, making each of his limbs unable to move. At this time, dozens of huge chainsaws driven by the Twilight believers arrived. These chainsaws powered by unknown divine spells were cruelly cutting his new limbs so that his body could maintain the appearance of a giant dragon. Hee hee. Ha. Hee 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 hee. This time, it was not only Zoth. In a trance, there seemed to be the remnant will of other ancient gods joining in the sneer. Perhaps it was Zoth, Yogg-Saron, or Yashaji. Their bodies might have completely perished, but as a former true god, the remnants of their will still reverberated in every corner of the Azeroth world. These ancient gods began to gather their power, and all of it was injected into Nesario's new body. Zoth laughed. Is it pain? Sadness? Resentment? Anger? Then let it all out. It didn't matter. This was also a form of strength. We are currently conducting a small experiment that will allow you to possess the destructive power of a true god. The more negative emotions you have, the more damage you'll cause to planet Azeroth. Is that so? That's wonderful. Nesario roared crazily. Due to some mysterious method, his furious roars started to spread across the entire deep rock continent. The violent tremors began. It was no longer a problem of the Earth elemental plane alone. The intense tremor crossed the planar barrier and directly affected planet Azeroth. In the southern sea of the Endless Ocean, it was originally a sunny day with a gentle sea breeze. In the next second, a huge tremor transmitted from the deep sea easily set off a monstrous wave. Rumble. At first, not many people noticed this scene. It wasn't until the huge green wave that approached the shore that the guards at the lighthouse noticed this scene. Oh my God! Is the world going to be destroyed? The 30-meter-tall goblin statue that once stood outside Booty Bay was as small as a baby in front of this doomsday wave. At this moment, Nesario's voice actually crossed the Earth elemental plane and the spatial barrier of Azeroth, echoing endlessly in the entire sky. Those were the words he roared a few minutes ago, and now they began to hover over the entire world in the form of echoes. Pain. Suffering, my hatred burns in the abyss. The world trembles because of my torment. If it were any other existence who uttered such curses, they would definitely be regarded as a lunatic. However, he was none other than that. He was the Wings of Death, Nesario, the former Earth Guardian Dragon, and now the Dragon of Death. Along with his voice, suddenly, a huge flaming crack tore the entire barren lands apart. The blazing lava was like a 100-story-tall lava dragon charging on the ground. The earth was torn apart from the bottom to the top, and every crack was accompanied by a burst of magma. There was nothing that could stop the destruction of the wrath of the heavens and earth. Mountains of all sizes were destroyed by the fire dragon's rampage. A huge orc town that was a few kilometers in the way of the fire dragon was destroyed like a bulldozer. Nisario's apocalyptic illusory sound continued, "The lamentable kingdom collapses under my wrath." A gale comparable to a level 12 storm suddenly blew. The goblin airship that was preparing to land in the sky above Agrima involuntarily spun and crashed on the spot. The wood that exploded and the fuel that flowed out caused a second disaster. At that moment, every tribe in the entire Agrima felt as if the world had turned upside down. Everyone lost their footing and fell to the ground. Amidst the chaos and screams of the soldiers. As long as they could see the scenery outside, they could only watch in despair as a grey tornado came crashing down on them. That scene looked very much like a foolish captain on a fishing boat, ordering his small dinghy to rush into the tsunami and face the storm. Under the dual effects of the earthquake and the storm, huge wooden houses with more than 2 stories collapsed and shattered under the double elemental disaster. Countless Agrima soldiers and civilians were swept under. When the last standing building in their field of vision was disassembled into parts by the combined forces of the earthquake and the storm, the gates of hell were almost right in front of them. It was a scene of chaos everywhere. The incomparably brave orcs left the ruins of the buildings like ants escaping from a flood. Every beam let out a terrible squeaking sound. This scene was like the end of the world. They abandoned the city that they had been proud of for the past 11 years and scattered in all directions. Standing on the high ground of the Valley of Wisdom, Thrall stood rooted to the ground and watched the scene. When a huge wooden stake flew towards him, he even forgot to dodge. It was Varrock who helped him knock the wooden stake away. In the ancient shrine of the Deep Rock continent, the Twilight believers began to use their own methods to modify Nisario's new dragon body under Zotha's command. Bang! 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 One by one, the iron stakes with dragon heads like siege awls hit Nisario's body. This was so that pieces of incomparably hard and mysterious metal could be inlaid into his constantly growing dragon body. The suppression of his growth was also solidifying his body. Chapter 1752. Ow! 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 It was a terrifying pain that was enough to make any living creature collapse. If it was possible, Nisario could continue to maintain his spiritual body and no longer have a nervous system. However, Zoth deliberately showed his bad taste. He used the ancient god's biological cells to activate Galakrin's cells that had been dead for 25,000 years, and then let Nisario, the dragon of death, still feel the explosive pain in his body. Every scale had the pain and itch of new flesh and bones being regenerated. The new flesh and blood that were born were constantly blocked, burnt, and destroyed by the hateful metal armor. Nisario could no longer bear the terrifying torture of being reincarnated repeatedly in the 18 levels of hell. Having regained control of his body, he used his enlarged claws to press down hard, destroying a large number of workshops and buildings around him. As if in response to his pain, almost every volcano in the land of Azeroth, no matter if they were active or dead, all of them began to pour out hot magma. The volcanoes erupted, shooting out flames that were enough to destroy everything in the world. In the northeasternmost area of the Kalimdor continent, the Black Sea coast, located in the sea north of Oberdeen, there had obviously been some slight changes in history. The elven hippogriffs that had long been scattered around the entire sea area, as well as the Alliance soldiers on the flying destroyers, all saw that with a violent vibration, a huge volcanic island broke through the shackles of the sea and stood upright on the surface of the sea. It was a newborn volcano. It was constantly venting its fiery anger towards the sky. Immediately, in the thick smoke and ashes of the volcano, a huge black dragon broke through the barrier of the rock layer, broke through the layer of space between the earth elemental plane and the real world of Azeroth, rushed out of the ground, and rushed into the sky amidst the volcanic ash. He easily rolled up to a height of 1,000 meters. The entire atmosphere was burning up, and a blazing aura swept across the clear sky for thousands of miles in an instant. Every scout and observer stared at the enormous creature in the distance in astonishment. Not to mention the rookies who were about 20 years old, even the seniors who had witnessed the great battle between the 5 dragon aspects in the south of Rotterdam City more than 20 years ago still felt a sense of powerlessness and fear when they saw the lava wyrm that was even larger and more exaggerated than the one they had seen in the past. Damn it! How could this beast be so huge back then? That doesn't seem right. Why do I feel like Nesario is more like Nozdormu now? Almost as soon as Nethario, the Wing of Death appeared. Duque, Sylvanas, Elun, and Alexstrasza, who had transcended the mortal world and stepped into the divine realm, sensed it immediately. Some were shocked, some were frowning, but Duque was embarrassed on the spot. It took him a long time to react, and he cursed in a low voice, "Coward. In the future, you can change your name to Coward Wing or Nazari Coward." Mortals were destined not to know about matters of the god realm. Countless scouts had risked their lives to send back reports that they had found the figure of a lava dragon suspected to be Nesario north of Oberdeen. It was a hellfire dragon in the form of a dragon. Its entire body was flowing with blazing lava, and terrifying fire elemental runes were branded in every corner of its stony body. He flapped his heavy stone wings, and without even circling in the air, he flew straight towards the south. Warning! Warning! A fire dragon suspected to be the Wing of Death is attacking the Oberdeen area of the Black Sea coast at high speed. In the intermittent magic communication network, the scout risked his life to send back an urgent report. He quickly received a reply, "Don't worry. Oberdeen has completed the evacuation." On the mountains to the east of Oberdeen, there were 5 specially set up observation stations. There were volunteer mages who had already left their wills there, and they were the only witnesses on the scene. They witnessed how the pier, which had maintained the frequent connection between the Night Elves Teldrassil and the Kalimdor continent for the past 10,000 years, was destroyed. Nesario was like a comet falling from space into the atmosphere, his whole body bathed in fire. He merely flapped his wings and flew over Oberdeen, but the huge sonic boom as he flew over the sea had already killed all the fish and shrimps in the sea near the shore of Oberdeen. The terrifying airflow generated by the high-speed flight was thousands of degrees hot. This terrifying tsunami-like heat wave easily lifted all the plank roads on Oberdeen Pier. The raging flames that followed immediately set off all the buildings on the pier. Not only the Night Elven-style wooden pier shading roof, but also the upgraded stone pier buildings were all engulfed in a sea of fire. The flames were so hot that the seawater around the pier instantly boiled. The fish that had just been killed by the shock turned white and became ripe meat, churning with the boiling sea. The Wing of Death crossed the entire Kalimdor continent from the location of Winterspring at a breakneck speed, then changed to the southeast, rushing all the way. It seemed that his speed was still increasing. He crossed the wetlands in the southern part of the Eastern Kingdom continent, changed to the south, and headed straight for Stormwind City. In the sky, his soul language filled with curses continued to spread. His deep whisper could be heard in several nearby areas. In the end, all of Azeroth will be destroyed. As if to confirm the words of the Wing of Death, when he swept past the boulder dam between Loch Moden and the wetlands at high speed. The extremely exaggerated air pressure directly crushed the dam. Loch Moden's original name meant lake in the Dwarven language, while Moden meant mountain range. Thus, in the Dwarven language, Loch Moden was a lake and a mountain range, just like its appearance. Loch Moden had a large lake and dam that could look down on all of Azeroth. Coupled with the fact that it was not polluted by the various heavens' wrath or demonic forces, it was once a very good place to live. The rich wildlife and fishing in the lake provided the daily necessities of the dwarves. The mountain range was filled with all kinds of precious minerals, and the Titan ruins that the dwarves liked to explore could really be said to be a paradise designed by the creator for the dwarves. However, the Wing of Death just passed by and destroyed the Boulder Dam. When they heard this real-time news, the eyes of the three Bronzebeard brothers turned red. Even though the people in the wetlands had already been evacuated, the building that the dwarves were so proud of, the Boulder Dam, had collapsed. This meant that more than 90% of the lake water would flow into the wetlands from the collapsed site, and the entire ecological environment would be severely affected. At this time, the Wing of Death finally shouted his last curse, "In the shadow of my wings, all things will turn to ashes." Chapter 1753. Everything will turn to ashes? Humph! How arrogant! When she determined that Deathwing did not fly to the Sin Dorii kingdom, Sylvanas had already returned to Stormwind City through a special portal. Here, she saw her sister and two nieces. "Hey! Deathwing seems to be coming to Stormwind City. I know you're strong, but how can you let your child?" Queen Sylvanas could not persuade him anymore. Because Duque was still in disguise, not even wearing a mage robe. He was just playing with the children. "I just watched you act cool quietly, never interrupting you." From the perspective of the elves, the song was simply out of tune and affecting the city, but it made the two elf Lolas giggle. Obviously, Duque saw something that Queen Sylvanas could not. Queen Sylvanas had never been a fool. It was just that after Silvermoon City was destroyed, she fell into extremes. Now that Arthas was destroyed, her revenge was avenged, and she was pregnant with a child. Queen Sylvanas's intelligence and wisdom were all displayed. Although Duque might have secretly hoped that Queen Sylvanas would become stupid for 3 years after pregnancy, in fact, Queen Sylvanas was very smart. Seeing that Duque did not move, she actually took off her ranger costume and changed into a set of home clothes, translucent pajamas. "Hey! Duque, tell me. Why don't you come over and accompany me?" A long white leg stretched over from the chaise longue next to her and touched the inside of Duque's thigh. Duque actually wanted to say, "Don't flirt, you'll get F***ked if you do." At this slightly weird point in time, Duque really could not do anything to Queen Sylvanas. "Stop it. Didn't you already send Countess Katrana to face the enemy?" "Pfft!" Queen Sylvanas burst out laughing. At this moment, Queen Sylvanas felt that Duque was bad to the core. Yes, bad to the core. There were many demigods on the Alliance's side. But there had never been a demigod like Onyxia, who had such a powerful talent but fought so cowardly. It could be said that Onyxia was invincible against enemies below the demigod level. Against enemies of the same level, he could not defeat anyone. In particular, she was very afraid of her father, Deathwing. Perhaps the fear of Nesario had been deeply engraved in her when she was still in her mother's womb. Her mother had been forcefully pushed by Darkwing. Not only had she used force, but she had also almost lost her life because of the splashing acid. When Nesario was still alive, she and her brother were just useful pawns for Nesario. Now, Duque had actually asked Onyxia to face her father, who had been strengthened by Enzos to an unknown extent. Duque was a little too evil. On the other hand, Sylvanas also firmly believed that the Deathwing that was charging over at high speed should not be in any danger. After all, in Stormwind City's King's Valley, after crossing the long stone bridge, there was a statue facing the gate, but it was a statue of Duke Marcus. If Nesario really stepped on Stormwind City's King's Valley with his claws, wouldn't all the statues of heroes, including Duque's statue, collapse and be destroyed? How could Duke do such a thing where he would be slapped in the face? Moreover, Duque was the kind of person who would indiscriminately gather a large force to kill his opponent as long as he had the opportunity. Even if he could not kill him, just like during the third battle at the Dark Portal, if he could not kill the fool, he could at least chop off one of his hands and break his waist. That was not bad either. Duque did not even have the intention to greet his subordinates. The only one who was kept in the dark was Onyxia. This was really, at this moment, Onyxia, who was still in the dark, was extremely conflicted on the lighthouse outside Storm Harbor, which was located in the north of Storm City. She was originally smart and cunning, but when Duque asked her to be the vanguard to fight against her father, she was in a mess. Duque's words still echoed in her ears. You can be a noob, but you can't be a coward. Because you are too timid, you can't exert your original combat power. That's the original sin. I have many women around me. Which one of them cannot fight, carry, warm the bed, and be independent? Onyxia, you cannot even believe in yourself, but you must at least believe in the me who believes in you. For some reason, Onyxia felt very warm in her heart when she heard the last tongue twister. When she thought back to what Duque had shown her back then, when she was in her zombie dragon form, she felt a chill run down her spine. She could not imagine that she, who loved beauty so much, would turn into such a horrifying and ugly appearance in a certain timeline. That was completely unacceptable. Feeling the roar of the atmosphere in the distance and carefully savoring the changes in the elements from far to near, Onyxia's face turned ashen. She suddenly felt a wave of coldness hit her face, as though she was afraid. She could not help but wrap her arms around her chest and hug her body. At this moment, feeling the tight-fitting lace victory shirt that Duque had given her, for some reason, she suddenly regained her courage. Onyxia, you can do it. You have the God of Fate Duke Marcus behind you. If you want to obtain your position in the new Divine Realm Palace, you must win this battle. Onyxia encouraged herself in an obsessive manner. It felt like her courage had multiplied. Onyxia jumped down from the 30-meter-tall lighthouse. She let the strong wind blow her long black hair, feeling the strong wind. Suddenly, she seemed to have returned to the era when she dominated the world alone. The ultimate transformation spell was instantly activated. She stretched out her neck and let out a long roar. Black wings appeared on her back, and her limbs turned into indestructible claws, covered with shiny black scales. The beautiful red robe with black trim turned into a stream of light and returned to the space storage bag, revealing her dragonized body. A thick tail grew out from her buttocks. When she neared the surface of the sea, she had completely changed back to her dragon form. Under the gaze of the Stormwind Navy's officers and soldiers, this giant dragon that had completed the gorgeous change in identity from an evil dragon that brought disaster to a country's guardian dragon was rapidly growing bigger. She quickly returned to her original size. In terms of size, her body was only less than 1/10 the size of the black dragon that attacked from the northern coast at high speed. However, this time, Onyxia bravely met her father, whom she had been extremely afraid of for a long time after she became sensible, the Wing of Death, Nethario. Nethario. This is the Stormwind city that my master, Duke Marcus, swore to protect. This is not a place for you to behave atrociously. Go back to where you came from. Otherwise, my master and I will let you taste true eternal destruction this time. Although her choice of words sounded a little hollow, Onyxia really roared with vigor. She was completely different from the timid daughter in Nethario's memory. At this moment, Nethario was a little confused. Chapter 1754. In terms of size, the current Nethario was nearly 10 times the size of Onyxia. The gigantic body of the dragon, which was wrapped in thick layers of rock, looked like a mountain with wings, soaring in the sky. It was as if this was the dragon version of a mantis trying to stop a chariot. Nethario flapped his huge wings that were as wide as Storm Harbor and hovered in the air. He opened his huge dragon mouth that could almost swallow his daughter in one bite, revealing his crisscrossed dragon teeth that looked like sharp rocks. He let out a loud laugh that could be heard all the way to Storm Harbor. Ha ha ha. My daughter, what are you talking about? If you're trying to make me laugh, then congratulations, you've succeeded. Nisario's face was full of ridicule. Now, I'll give you one last chance. Tell me your true identity. Please pay attention to what you say. I will decide whether to tear you into pieces, and then turn you into a zombie dragon to continue serving my cause of destruction. This was an unmistakable threat. He was clearly trying to force Onyxia to betray Duke and join Neltharion's side again. As for whether she would be used as cannon fodder or something else in the future, there was no way of knowing. In front of the mountain-like body of the Wings of Death, Onyxia really looked very, very small. If it was in the past, Onyxia would have been terrified no matter what. I can't win. I definitely can't win. Going against a terrifying existence like Father is courting death. Don't fight him. Once we start fighting, I might be torn to pieces in just one round. The voice that emerged from Onyxia's heart at this moment was the best portrayal of her mood. There were many voices in her heart. Surprisingly, she did not feel upset at all. It was as if the voices that also came from her heart could not affect the core thoughts that dominated her. At most, they were like buzzing flies, which was a little annoying. Although the timidity in her heart could not be eradicated, what flashed through her mind at this moment were images of Duque's victories flattening the king of the Molten Core Sea. Taking care of her brother Nefarian in Blackwing's nest. Killing the ancient god Sea Thun in the temple of Kiraj. In the Outland, Draenor beat up Illidan. The Sunwell was stuck in Kil'jaeden. Oder beat up Yogg-Saron. He destroyed the Lich King Arthas at the Ice Crown Fortress. Onyxia did not know how far Duque's undefeated legend could go. But it seemed that this was far from Duque's limit. It was enough for him to stand with the victors. As for his father. A loser who had been killed by Duque once still had the nerve to bark. She did not know when it started, but in Onyxia's eyes, her father, who was incomparably huge, seemed to have become small. His threatening words were more like the whimpers of a dog, not worth mentioning. Onyxia's dragon face revealed a very human-like expression of mockery. Who am I? Of course I am Onyxia, the most loyal mount of the mighty demigod of the Weave, Duke Marcus. As long as Master is willing, you can ride me anytime, anywhere, and however you want. I'm also willing to kill all those who stand in my way for Master, including you, my so-called father, Nisario. What a shock! What a shock! Nisario had never thought that his daughter, whom he had not seen for a long time, would lose her moral integrity to this extent. Where was his impression of the yes-man daughter who was only fit to be his thug? Why did he feel that this female black dragon in front of him, who looked exactly the same, was so unfamiliar? Nisario had yet to react. The Black Dragon Princess, who had lost her moral integrity, continued shamelessly, "Poor Nisario, haven't you had enough of being a toy of the ancient gods? Since my master can kill you once, he can kill you countless times until you are completely erased from the river of time. Your so-called backer, Zoth, is nothing more than this. As long as he dares to show his face, he will be besieged and killed by Master, just like his companions Sea Thun and Yogg-Saron." Onyxia was so proud of herself, like a fox exploiting a tiger's might. Nisario could not believe his ears, and it took him a full 3 seconds to react. Enough. You're a disgrace to the Black Dragons. Scum of the dragons. You've lost all the face of the WYRMS, face? I'm the Dragon of Justice who turned over a new leaf and successfully joined the ranks of the dragon aspects. There's nothing to be ashamed of. Even Alexstrasza has tacitly agreed that I'm Master Duque's mount. Humph. I'm so disappointed. It seems that you've been completely brainwashed by that despicable human. Brainwashed? You've obviously been brainwashed by Zatha's murmurs of the ancient gods. The black dragon did not lose to her father when it came to trash talking. He had been reduced from a proud dragon aspect to a slave of an ancient god. Although he knew deep down that it was indeed the case, Nesario had never been willing to admit it. It was bad enough that his daughter was extroverted, but she was still frantically digging up old wounds. This was simply intolerable. Ow, the ancient gods are the true rulers of this world. Since these shameless lowly creatures have stolen this world, I will completely purify this world on behalf of the ancient gods, and then rebuild a great world that belongs to the elements. In a fanatical atmosphere that he had created, Nesario's IQ seemed to have plummeted, and he suddenly shouted slogans. Crazy. Capricious. This was also one of the important reasons why Onyxia was afraid of her father in the first place. But at this moment, she felt that her so-called terrifying father was nothing more than this. That was because her experience had changed her view. Different perspectives meant different views. In the face of Nesario, who had begun to charge at her, Onyxia spat out a fireball. This fireball seemed to be no different from the ones she usually used. Nesario did not care. When he realized that he could not use his wings to fan away the fireball that was coming straight at him, he raised a huge claw and slapped it. Bang! With a loud bang, the fireball hit the tip of the claw and exploded. The scorching airflow rippled the air around the claw. Due to the rapid change in the temperature of the atmosphere, the field of vision there looked a little blurry and distorted. Something unexpected happened. The tip of the dragon claw, which was wrapped in earth elements and collided with the fireball, exploded on the spot. Onyxia clearly saw that a section of the fingertip was blown off by the explosion. Under the impact of the explosion, it flew dozens of meters away, then fell in an arc towards the sea. Wait a minute. What the hell is this? At this moment, Onyxia suddenly remembered the first sentence that Duque said when he ordered her to fight. I'll leave that coward wing to you. Coward. Chapter 1755. Ah. Onyxia was not the only one who was confused. Even Neltharion himself looked flustered. After a while, he finally stopped in the midst of a series of screams. Impossible. I'm not. Onyxia was not a fool. On the contrary, she was a highly intelligent character the moment she appeared. Unfortunately, when Duque subdued her, he seemed to have damaged her morale too much, causing her to turn into a coward like Onyxia. Without any hope, the conspiracies that she was once proud of were all banned. Having given up on herself, Onyxia gave up her courage and stopped thinking at the same time. She regarded herself as a simple mount, which made her look like she was under the monkey-style reduction spell. At this moment, Onyxia knew at a glance that the giant dragon in front of her was not her father. At least, this body was not. She suddenly realized that if the one who had attacked was really Nesario, would Duque have allowed her to bicker with her father for so long? He would definitely have brought a large team to attack. Onyxia narrowed her eyes. Poor Nesario, you don't have the fear and dignity of the wings of death anymore. You're just a toy of Zoth. You didn't even realize that your consciousness was attached to a stone dragon made of evil magic. No. My body was only damaged by that bastard Maligos. Nesario defended himself. Huh? How can you say such shameful words when your remains were insulted by your own brother? It seems that you're no different from me, right? The Black Dragon Princess, who had made up her mind, immediately spat out her venomous tongue happily. Oh, no, no, no. You're already dead. My late father. You can no longer feel the beauty of life. Although I look a little shameful, when Master Duque becomes a true god in the future, I can also become the most powerful oracle. When Onyxia said this, Duque, who was in Stormwind City, had already face-bombed. He could not bear to look anymore. Perhaps, this was the price. Sometimes, it was difficult to have the best of both worlds. He had subdued the Black Dragon Princess, only to find that she had lost all her integrity. Sure enough, when it came to conquering, the most important thing was the process of conquering, not the result. All right. Onyxia, get rid of this stone doll, Duque ordered the Black Dragon Princess through the soul link. Yes, sir. My master. Onyxia seemed to have been injected with adrenaline and rushed over while howling. He opened his mouth and spat out fireballs. This wasn't a fireball from the era of the Molten Core. Although Duque had confirmed through the magic net that the dragon made of rock and fire elements was a fake as soon as he popped out of Nesario, Duque did not dare to take it lightly. If things went wrong, Onyxia's journey of gathering her courage would become a journey of sending food to her death. Hence, as a reward for her long loyalty, Duque gave her a small portion of the control over the fire element. This portion was not a portion in the ordinary sense, but a portion of divinity. The portion of the control over the fire elemental realm that Duque had obtained from Ragnaro's clone in the Molten Core was actually not much, but in order to give the loyal Black Dragon some confidence and hope, Duque reluctantly gave her a third of it. That was because, in Duque's eyes, there was already a bigger cake placed in front of him. The cataclysm had already begun, and the four major elemental realms were extremely close to Azeroth. At this time, Duque could already kill his way to the land of fire where the fire elemental realm was and fight it out with Ragnaros. As long as he completely defeated the Fire Demon King this time, the fire elemental realm would only have his, Duke Marcus, voice in the future. Another fireball was spat out. Onyxia's fireball still looked like an egg, but its actual power had increased by more than 10 times. Compared to this giant version of Neltharion, her fireball was clearly just a small flame, but when it exploded on her body, it was really painful. Boom! The exaggerated explosion actually blasted a huge hole the size of a villa in Neltharion's lower abdomen. Under that thick rock layer, there was no flesh, no bones, only dry and tasteless rocks. No matter how weak Onyxia was, she was still a demigod dragon. It was not difficult to beat up a fake that only had a good appearance. Onyxia, who disliked using flames to bombard too slowly, completely got rid of the fear that her father had brought to her this time. She boldly rushed forward, swung her long and thick black dragon tail that was even more powerful than a battering ram, and smashed it hard. This fake was really big. The stone dragon that was purely driven by elements and part of the soul fragment could be said to be terrible in terms of agility. After receiving a series of heavy blows, the fake Nesario finally could not hold on any longer, and his movements clearly slowed down for a moment. The Black Dragon Princess, who was even more petite, seized the opportunity to do a 3.5 somersault with a degree of difficulty of 4.0, and hit the former's chest with a spiral flick of her tail. The terrifying blow caused the stone chest to cave in deeply. Terrifying cracks spread in all directions layer by layer, and the dragon-shaped shell burst into pieces. The remnant soul of Nesario, which was attached to the stone dragon body, let out a shrill soul wail. He tried hard to control the unfamiliar body in an attempt to launch a counterattack. Unfortunately, Onyxia, who was full of confidence, was even more at ease in the battle. In Duque's opinion, her attack was as ridiculous as using a plastic serrated knife to cut a 1,000-year-old tree. In fact, her destruction was quite efficient. The stone dragon body parts, large and small, were crushed under her attack. Like a bulldozer, she quickly shoveled away a huge sand sculpture called Nesario, piece by piece. Soon, when the chest of the fake was blown up, a scarlet crystal was revealed. Duque, who was observing from Stormwind City, could not help but exclaim, F***ck. I've never seen such a big, heart of the mountains. This mysterious gem, which theoretically could only be born in huge mountains, had quite amazing earth elemental magic. Unexpectedly, Zoth was so awesome that he found such a big one and used it as the core of Neserio's substitute. Although Duque wanted to tell Onyxia not to touch this thing, it was too late. The black dragon, who was immersed in the fact that she had defeated her father, smashed the small house-sized heart of the mountains with her tail. Boom! With a loud sound, the huge stone dragon body collapsed and shattered, and every dragon-shaped part on its body began to fall apart on its own. It was as if there was a meteor shower in the sky, and huge rocks fell into the sea 10 kilometers away from Stormport. Chapter 1756. Dong! 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 The sound of the boulder falling into the sea was like the drumbeat of victory. Onyxia's heart leaped with joy. Ha! I finally dared to make a move against father. Sure enough, even that fellow Neserio is afraid of Duque. The black dragon's words naturally had two meanings. First, she had finally surpassed herself and dared to use her dragon claws on someone she once thought to be absolutely terrifying and someone she would never dare to disobey. Second, even someone as terrifying as the wings of death still had to walk around Duque when they saw him. This was a simple and straightforward reason. If Neserio was really that powerful, why didn't he just kill his way to Duque's doorstep and start a war with him? From the beginning to the end, Duque had released his elemental fluctuations and clearly told all his enemies, Duke Marcus, I'm waiting for you in Stormwind City. Perhaps it could be said that Duque was arrogant, but it could also be said that Duque was sinister. After all, whoever dared to come to Stormwind City would be swarmed by the demigod powerhouses who had been waiting for a long time through the portal and devoured the intruder. However, Neserio was terrified. This was real. He didn't even dare to personally issue a challenge, so he sent an unpresentable stone substitute. If this wasn't cowardice, what was? Wahaha! Neserio is terrified. Wings of cowardice. You don't even have the courage to face my master, so don't pretend to be the best in the world. Let me tell you, if my master can destroy you once, he can destroy you a second time. Onyxia laughed wildly as she looked at the sea where Neserio's substitute had fallen. Although the object of her ridicule was her father, the messy affairs of the Black Dragon clan and the terrible family relationship that was prone to killing each other were just like that. Duke Marcus, just you wait. Once I destroy Azeroth, I'll see what use a demigod like you will have. Neserio's roar came from the void. At this moment, Duque's virtual image also appeared and landed on the special seat above Onyxia's neck. Even though she knew that Duque's main body wasn't here, the Black Dragon Princess still cooperated and allowed Duque to ride her. She flapped her long dragon wings and hovered in the air. Oh. Since you're dead, Neserio, you should wait quietly for your soul to dissipate. Why did you come here to court death? But if you have any tricks up your sleeves, just come at me. I'll take them on. Duque raised his head at a standard 45-degree angle, exposing his nostrils in the direction of Neserio's spiritual sense. That's right. He just scoffed at it. Neserio didn't even have the guts to show his face. Similarly, Duque didn't have to come in person. He just had to give a magical 3D image. He. Let's see if you can still be so confident after the world you're so proud of is completely destroyed. After a sneer, Neserio's divine sense disappeared into the void. Phew. Duque's projection exhaled, then looked down at Onyxia. Come back first. Yes, master. Her shiny black dragon tail was wagging like a cute puppy. It was obvious that she was in a good mood. In Stormwind City, Duque quietly watched the changes on planet Azeroth through the mage's eyes that the magic net had set up all over the world. The cataclysm had finally begun. Most of the changes were as Duque remembered. The biggest problem on the Alliance's side was still the collapse of the Boulder Dam, which directly changed the landscape of the wetlands and Loch Moden. Loch Moden was the source of food for the Bronzebeard dwarves. They couldn't expect the icy Dan Molar to produce enough food for hundreds of thousands of Bronzebeard dwarves. It was foreseeable that the dwarves would cooperate more closely with the Alliance. The Iron Furnace Fort could only buy food with the money from selling machinery and firearms if it became a purely industrial country. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Unfortunately, before the cataclysm happened, Duque couldn't say, "I have a premonition that the Boulder Dam will collapse, so you guys do new work in the wetlands in advance." After all, what if the fortifications in the wetlands collapsed as well? In one of the visual images, a huge pit appeared in the middle of Stranglethorn Vale, which turned into a large whirlpool. The technical term for it was a pit fissure. However, when Duque asked Kurtiras to develop the new capital in Booty Bay, he had already taken the cataclysm into account. Not only did he avoid this pit located in the northeast of the Gurubashi Arena, but he also used 100,000 murlocs to build a giant breakwater in the shallow sea area west of Booty Bay. Once upon a time, the captains always complained that they needed to go around the huge breakwater to enter this port, which had been renamed from Booty Bay to Proudmoore City. Now, none of them said a word. In fact, Nesario, who had been instigated by Zoth, could not have done such terrifying damage alone. However, he had brought the 4 major elemental realms closer to Azeroth, which was the fatal part. Even if the will of the planet Azeroth recovered, it would not be able to stop the turbulence caused by the elemental disorder. Moreover, in order to kill Thun back then, the planet had already suffered serious injuries. To recover from injuries of this level, the time needed by the will of the planet was often measured in units of hundreds of years. Even though it had suffered injuries of this level, the will of the planet only sent a vague question. If translated into human language, it would only be one sentence: what happened? Zoth activated the Wings of Death, Nesario, and brought the 4 major elemental realms closer to the main plane. However, I think we can solve it ourselves. This was how Duque replied to the will of the planet. "I'll leave it to you." That was what Azeroth said. Duque knew that this was a form of trust and a promise. As long as he dealt with Nesario this time and did things properly, the reward in the future would definitely be beyond his expectations. On this side, because they had taken the most thorough precautions, the losses of the Alliance could be said to be very light. In terms of damage, it was not even as serious as the disaster that Arthas led by the cataclysm that swept across the Lordaeron continent 15 years ago. After all, the evacuation work had been done in advance, and not many people had died. At present it was estimated that the entire Alliance had only lost a few hundred people. In addition, most of the Alliance used reinforced concrete to build houses, and the houses that collapsed were all old wooden houses, which happened to be able to sell a wave of cement. The Iron Stove Fort was not a disaster area. The Stormwind Industrial Zone in the Elven Forest had avoided the possibility of a catastrophe when it was first established. It could be said that the industrial foundation of the Alliance was almost undamaged. As long as they spent some time, the Alliance could take the opportunity to get rid of the old and welcome the new. They could replace the old houses and backward handicrafts, and turn the entire Alliance into a blessing in disguise and usher in a new life. Phew! In the study, Duque let out a breath of turbid air. We finally made it through. Just as Duque sighed, he found that Onyxia had returned. "Master, it seems that you haven't tamed a dragon for a long time, right?" The black dragon's face was unusually flushed. Chapter 1757. Dragons that had been adjusted by the Titans could be said to be the perfect existence at the top of the food chain. Not only did they have high intelligence, but they could also control the elements and even transcend the mortal world. As a price, their fertility was greatly reduced. Frankly speaking, the ancestor dragon could really eat and give birth. Compared to their long lifespan, the dragon's estrus seemed very short. So when Duque saw Onyxia like this, his heart skipped a beat and he blurted out, "You're, in estrus?" The Black Dragon Princess, who had long taken on the appearance of Countess Katrana, blushed even more, but she became hesitant. "No, it's just that today I finally broke through my inner demons and dared to fight my father. I feel very happy. I want to repay Master. Although I have no interest in taming dragons, if Master is happy, I will be happy too." Onyxia was always passive when it came to taming dragons because of her pride. Since she took the initiative to bring it up, Duque, who had nothing to do and was waiting to see the tribe suffer, readily followed her good advice. Seeing her lift the red lace skirt with black edges and reveal the battle suit inside, Duque was dumbfounded. "You're wearing this to fight against your father? I feel that the thing you gave me will give me courage." "Alright, F***ck, as long as you like it." Now that he was familiar with the route, Duque directly activated Dragon Cave Exploration Mode. This was a rare and hardy dragon taming ceremony. At this moment, the space around Duque suddenly distorted. At first, Duque did not care. He had set up a restriction a long time ago. Unless it was a specific target, if anyone dared to open a portal within 100 meters of him, the system elf would definitely pop up a warning and automatically activate magic to seal off the surrounding space. Since the alarm was not triggered at this time, the person coming must be on the safe white list. There were not many people on Duque's white list who could tear through space and kill their way here. Duque was having a good time and subconsciously thought that it was Jaina. When Duque saw that Red Dragon Queen Alexstrasza will arrive in 30 seconds, Duque was shocked. At this moment, even Onyxia noticed the spatial fluctuations in the room. "Damn, it's Alexstrasza!" Duque exclaimed. Normally, the Red Dragon Queen would never teleport so close to Duque. She must have something urgent. Alright, it just had to be stuck at the crucial point of Duque taming the dragon. Duque's life was at stake. Dumuk was on the verge of breaking down. His own wife, Aurelia, didn't even care about him, but he ran into Alexstrasza. This was like a scene where adultery was caught. No matter how fast he moved, there were still many traces that he couldn't clean up in time. The two of them couldn't help but silently say, "Don't ever get discovered," 100 times. Space was finally broken. The Queen's knee-high red boots were the first to step out. Before the humanoid Red Dragon Queen arrived, she could already hear her complaints. "Duque, what the hell are you doing? First, you tacitly allowed me to come in, then suddenly locked it? I've been very busy all these years. I wouldn't have come to you unless there was something important." What's that smell?" The Red Dragon Queen tilted her head. The two curved dragon horns on her head tilted to one side, looking a little silly. "No, nothing." Duque had already opened the window for ventilation. The Red Dragon Queen sniffed hard. She wasn't a shut-in dragon who had never been to human society. After just 3 seconds, she knew the truth of the matter. "Yo! I can't believe you, Duque, actually used the current Earth Guardian dragon as a mating partner." Pfft! Duque spat out a mouthful of blood. Onyxia was so embarrassed that she lowered her head, almost burying her face in between her two dragon peaks. The Red Dragon Queen 38 took small steps and circled around Duque and Onyxia, making comments like "GG" from time to time. "This lady who is suspected to be the Red Dragon Queen Alexstrasza, please conduct yourself with dignity." Duque's face was dark, his forehead full of black lines. "I've always found it strange. How could the sinister and cunning Onyxia be completely tamed by you? So there's this kind of operation. So she got addicted to the game and really thought of herself as a woman. In the end, she developed a relationship with you that transcends species?" The female detective Formosa propped her chin up and made an irresponsible deduction. "You're filthy. Do you believe that I won't bring demigods of the weave to attack the dragon slumber shrine? Duque threatened. No. The thick-skinned Queen 38 was resolute. What the hell, can we even talk properly? Duque was also furious. He might as well go all the way. He sat down and pulled the dragoness into his arms. His hands moved all over her, making a dragon roar. Don't you want to see? I'll let you see enough. Duque was so shameless that Alexstrasza cowered. Alright, alright. The dragon slumber shrine doesn't care about the private lives of giant dragons. There's a guy from the blue dragon side who fell in love with a well, and there's also a guy who's infatuated with a soul doctor. It's not unusual for a female dragon to fall in love with a demigod. As she said this, Onyxia, who was in Duque's arms, visibly relaxed. Let's get down to business. Duque quickly changed the topic. At this moment, the slightly off-track Dragon Queen suddenly realized something and exclaimed, "Ah! I almost forgot about business. I just felt the soul fluctuations of the ancestor dragon's father, Galakran, in the soul of Nesario's substitute." Galakran. This name was very unfamiliar to Duque. However, every player who had been in the Dragonbone Waste would be puzzled by the exaggerated dragon bones in the Dragonbone Waste. When Alexstrasza finished explaining the story to Duque, Duque muttered to himself. Needless to say, Zotha's train of thought was really ingenious. He could even come up with such an awesome idea. Speaking of which, Galakran had been dead for 25,000 years, but he could still extract vitality factors. This made Duque speechless. Now, Duque was really a little worried. If the reborn Nesario also had the ability to devour living dragons and strengthen himself, that would not be good. After all, he could choke that guy to death by throwing a big stone last time. This time, Nesario was already dead. Not to mention choking him, even if he used a stone to replace his heart, he would still be alive and kicking. Damn it, Duque. This was a little tricky. Duque, I don't know why, but I have an ominous feeling this time. Back then, the four of us could have worked together to deal with Nesario. Now that he has been resurrected by Zoth, he must be even more terrifying. And he has Galakran's ability. If you don't help me, I really don't have any confidence. Alexstrasza showed a rare timid look. Chapter 1758. Onyxia had been too ashamed to face her senior, Alexstrasza. Now, it was the Red Dragon Queen who had lowered her head. Duque could understand what she was thinking. The 5 dragon aspects were like brothers and sisters. Not only were they brothers and sisters from the progenitor dragons, but they were also companions who had been blessed by the Titans to become higher-level dragons. Killing Neltharion once was already an unbearable torment. Now, not only did he have to suffer a second time, he also had to face the nightmare of Galakran. If it was Duke Ku, he would probably go crazy from the endless entanglement of ill-fated karma. More importantly, Duque knew the fate of the original dragon aspects. At the time of the cataclysm, it was Nozdormu's turn to die. What was even more cruel was that not only did Duque know, but Nozdormu himself also knew. It was as if he had an incurable disease, yet he still had to remain silent and walk step by step to the end, waiting for his destruction. It was definitely not a good feeling. However, the Bronze Dragon King had not said a word from start to finish. After sighing, Duque smiled. Who do you think I am? If I don't help you, who will? Suddenly, even Alexstrasza's eyes became misty. Yes. When did it start? It seemed that Duque had saved her in order to fight against the tribe. She had always tried her best to help Duque. Alexstrasza might have been able to maintain a sense of superiority in the beginning. As Duque's strength rose like a rocket, Duque, who had seemed insignificant in the past, became the new guardian and savior of Azeroth. When the dragon aspects fell, it was Duque who came to the rescue. When Otter's guardian died, it was Duque who appeared and held the fort. Since the beginning of the Dark Portal, Duque had appeared almost every time there was a crisis to save the world. Whether she was willing to admit it or not, Duque and his forces had become an important part of Azeroth's survival. Even though she knew that Duque was doing this to help himself, Alexstrasza still felt a surge of warmth when she heard such a firm and unhesitant promise. "Thank you. You're welcome." Duque nodded lightly. As if her brain had gone haywire, Alexstrasza suddenly asked, "You really don't need to thank me? Like having sex with you once, like Onyxia?" "Pfft," Dumuk spurted out. "Onyxia just wanted to find a hole to hide in." "Forget it." Duque felt a headache coming on. Things like taming dragon were only interesting when it came to specific targets. If it was a challenge of this nature, then forget it. To avoid any awkwardness in the future. After all, whether or not Alexstrasza understood human emotions was another question. The queen put her hands on her waist and looked left and right. Actually, I feel that my elf form is more in line with human aesthetics." "What, you don't like it?" "No. That's not the problem." Duque's balls continued to ache faintly. After talking for a long time, Duque finally understood that Alexstrasza was lacking a brain. If he really ked her, he reckoned that Duque would not feel any sense of accomplishment. "Speaking of which, when do you think we should make a move on Nesario?" Duque pondered for a moment. Now Zoth and Nesario are thinking of a way to completely connect the world of Azeroth with the four elemental realms. This will certainly cause unrest in the main Azeroth plane, but it's also an opportunity to strengthen the planet. In my opinion, it's more appropriate to wait for the overlapping spatial structure to stabilize before launching a fierce attack. "I see. How long do we have to wait?" "According to the current progress of the spatial fusion, about 3 months should be enough. At the latest, no more than half a year." 3 months was a very delicate period of time. As a long-term plan, it was undoubtedly too short. However, it was more than enough to ferment certain events. History had unknowingly taken a turn. In the original history, at this point in time, William had long been driven crazy by the near collapse of the economy. William was an excellent warrior, but he was not a king who understood economics. Therefore, William was very irritable at this time, and the ghost wolf's personality began to gain the upper hand. In this life, with Duque, although the economic lifeline of Stormwind was almost entirely in the hands of the Marcus family, as long as Duque and William did not oppose each other, Stormwind's economy could be said to be under a lot of pressure, but it was still quite healthy overall. In particular, Duque had made economic transformation and various disaster relief plans in response to the cataclysm. In addition, from the end of the crusade against the Lich King to the occurrence of the cataclysm, there were a few extra months of buffer time. This caused the entire economic system of the Alliance, including Stormwind, to undergo a slight sharp turn. However, there was still a long way to go before it overturned or even collapsed. Duque was too outstanding. He was so outstanding that even though William did not have a good relationship with Duque, he still unconditionally handed over the country's economy to Duque. This allowed William to focus on training the army of Stormwind. The only thing that William was unhappy about was that his son, Anduin Wrynn, was too soft. He was like a wimp, and not manly at all. He did not know that his son would become the famous Dirty Shepherd in the future. He would always believe in Brother Spring and resurrect hundreds of Alliance soldiers on the spot. At this moment, this irritable father was extremely troubled. Unfortunately, because Duque had intervened in the Van Cleve incident and settled things with Onyxia, William's queen, Tiffany Alien, was still alive in this life. To some extent, she had become little Anduin's protective umbrella. William, who was helpless against his queen, kicked little Anduin to the Bronzebeard brothers, hoping that Magni could teach him to become a great warrior. Duque had vaguely mentioned that he sensed little Anduin had other talents. But William was very stubborn at certain times. "My father is a warrior. I am a warrior. Uncle Anduin Lothar is a warrior. Little Anduin must be a warrior too." Since William said so, what else could Duque do? Abduct little Anduin, turn around, and groom him into a dirty shepherd before returning him to William? William would probably fight him to the death, hence, little Anduin had already been thrown to Magni's side before the cataclysm. Magni was especially surprised by Anduin's arrival. He had not enjoyed the joy of family life for too long. Both of his younger brothers were busy. One was guarding the northern borderline and dealing with the aftermath, and the other was obsessed with archaeology after dealing with the Lich King. His beloved only daughter had long fallen out with him. Magni treated Anduin like his own son. The Dwarf King often called the little prince to his room to eat and chat, and enjoyed the time as a father and son. He especially requested Anduin not to call him His Majesty, but Uncle. Chapter 1759. Duque knew it through cheating as a transmigrator, but Magni knew what little Anduin was more suitable to do through pure communication. He didn't agree with William's plan to train Anduin into a warrior because Anduin didn't want to be one at all. In fact, he was more suited to be a priest than a warrior. For this reason, Magni even gave Anduin the Bronzebeard family's holy hammer, Crusher of Fear, which had been passed down for generations in the Bronzebeard family. This hammer of magic damage would shine in the right hands, and Anduin was such a person. In short, Anduin enjoyed the happiest period of his life in the Iron Furnace Castle. Unfortunately, happy times were always short-lived. Now, Magni had another important thing to do. "Uncle Magni, do you have to go?" Little Anduin looked reluctant after knowing Magni's plan. "Anduin, you will eventually inherit your father's legacy and become the king of Stormwind. Your life and soul, from the day you were born with the surname Urin, no longer belong to you, but to the people of Stormwind. This is the glory of being a king, and also the duty of a king." Anduin didn't really understand, but he nodded obediently. Magni solemnly placed his hands on Anduin's shoulders, who could already be considered a youth. "Only I can walk my path. I am walking for all the dwarves. This is everyone's hope, and also my own choice." Anduin pursed his lips and nodded again. Unlike the original history, this time, Magni chose his own path after knowing most of the situation. Under the guidance of Rock Warden Alcavan, Bulang didn't have to spend much effort to find the designated stone slab in Oder. It was a treasure left behind by the Titans, and recorded on it was the method to communicate with the earth element. It was called Earth Slab. Magni knew the value of this gift from Alcavan, and took it very seriously. After some research, he looked for Duque, and expressed his wish to follow Alcavan's guidance to conduct an ancient ritual according to the records on the stone slab, and attempt to communicate with the earth in order to break through to the realm of demigods. "I am most worried about the fate of the dwarves, and also worried that if I leave for too long, it will cause political unrest. Also, I'm afraid that the ritual will cause an earthquake and destroy the Iron Furnace Fort, so I want to open the old Iron Furnace Fort." In the end, Duque could not help but reveal a spoiler. "No, I tried to further interpret the Titan language on the slate. Although it wasn't 100%, according to my estimations, the power of this ritual would be quite mild. The only problem is that, as an Earth type, you've probably been a demigod for much longer than Servanas and I. How long was it?" Muradin, who had rushed back, asked. "According to my estimation, it will probably take several years. It shouldn't be more than 10 years. What Duque said was an estimate, but those who were familiar with Duque all believed that Duque had seen too many things in the long river of history. Perhaps because of the restrictions, Duque could not reveal too much, but everyone understood. Magni made his final decision. Iron Furnace Castle cannot be without a king for a day. So be it, Muradin. You will inherit my throne, and then I will perform the ceremony. If I'm lucky enough to succeed, I'll come back and be the guardian of the Iron Furnace Fort. No. The throne is yours, big brother. I only agree to manage the Iron Furnace Castle as the acting king when you're gone. When you return, the throne will still be returned to you. No, second brother, big brother, you're taking a gamble for the future of the dwarves. Do you want me to bear the stigma of stealing the throne of heroes? Muradin roared with great agitation. In the end, under Muradin's insistence, Magni finally gave in and agreed to let Muradin be the acting king. It was different from the original history where he had to communicate with the earth to seek answers because of the elemental riots. Now, Magni was doing it with a clear goal, and had arranged everything in advance. This way, even the elders of the Bronzebeard dwarves could not say anything. There was no so-called succession ceremony. It was just a gathering of the ministers and the handover of government affairs. Muradin Bronzebeard became the acting king, and while Magni's soul slept, he held all the power of the Bronzebeard dwarven king. It's time. 3 days later, under the watchful eyes of Duque, Muradin, Bulang, Kudrin Wildhammer, Rock Watcher Arkavan, and a group of dwarven elders, as well as the dwarven guards in the secret chamber, Muradin activated the ritual of connecting his soul to the earth. The earthen yellow radiance filled every inch of the magic array that extended from the stone slab. The earth bore all things. The earth nourished all things. The richness of the earth was not something that water, fire, and wind, the three more intense elements, could compare to. Under the watchful eyes of hundreds of pairs of eyes, Magni Bronzebeard's body slowly changed. It was a stiffening that spread from the soles of his feet. Arkavan used his deep voice to guide Magni, "Do not be afraid. The essence of dwarves is the earth spirit. You have just returned to the roots of your race. Slow down your breathing, and let yourself become a part of the earth once again. Release your will, and slowly search for your self-worth in the earth. When you find your answer in the embrace of Mother Earth, that will be the day you become a demigod." Magni's body had crystallized. In less than 5 minutes, from his feet to his waist, then to his chest, neck, limbs, and finally even his head had turned into diamonds. It looked like Magni had completely lost his breath, and had become a diamond man. If they didn't know better, they would probably think that Magni was already dead. This was the case in history, and Muradin and Bulang had no intention of taking the throne, and were even more unwilling to snatch the throne of their not-yet-dead brother under such circumstances. This caused the Bronzebeard dwarves to fall into great chaos. With Duque as a witness and Arkavan's guidance, everything became logical. Muradin bowed deeply to Duque, "I'll leave the magical protection to you." Duque bowed deeply in return, "Leave it to me." After Duque spent an hour to complete a demigod-level magical protection circle, he connected it to the magic net and monitored it at all times. A team of 100 dwarven secret room guards were stationed around the magic circle. In the next few years, they would take turns to guard their king's surroundings, until Magni returned after stepping into the divine realm, or, to witness Magni's true, eternal death. While the dwarves were transitioning their power, a terrible political storm was brewing on the tribe's side. Thrall had lost control of the tribe. Answer me. Great Chief, what exactly caused the tribe to weaken and degenerate? Tens of thousands of orcs gathered in Orgrimmar's Valley of Wisdom, Valley of Power, and Valley of Spirit, letting out earth-shattering questions. Chapter 1760. Agrima, who was surrounded by mountains, paced back and forth in the sky above the ruined main city. Through the wooden walls of the great chieftain's hall, it went straight into the ears of everyone inside. "Great chieftain, I'll go and disperse those ignorant brats." Varrock was indignant. Not only him, but the other guards of the great chieftain were the same. Thrall waved his hand and smiled bitterly. What if they don't want to leave? Then beat them up. What if those young people impulsively use weapons? Varrock hesitated. Was he really willing to suppress his own people with blood? On the contrary, young Salyafar was even more irritable. Although he was already a Death Knight, he was still deeply trusted by the great chieftain. After the return of the Sun King, Anastrian stepped down as the leader of the Forsaken, and now Dranos Salyafar became the leader of the Forsaken as a Death Knight. Dranos waved his arms vigorously. Those scum, if I wasn't already dead, I'd go to the gate and put up a flag. If they have the ability, come to Makra. They refuse to obey the leadership of the strongest and dare not challenge. What kind of traditional beast men are they? Thrall didn't say anything. He looked at young Salyafar with infinite regret. If possible, he would have preferred Dranos to be his successor. Unfortunately, this kid died in the hands of Arthas, even if he regained his freedom after becoming a Death Knight. But a tribe dominated by beast men couldn't have a Forsaken as the great chieftain. At least not in the current atmosphere. Wajin spoke. Great chieftain, I smell a conspiracy. In fact, I would suggest that we immediately send more people and encourage those who are dissatisfied to directly launch Makra. Let the challengers first challenge the various chieftains, and then challenge the great chieftain as a chieftain. If you can win a few rounds, the atmosphere of the tribe will be much better. The bitter smile on Thrall's face became even more bitter. What's the point of just stabilizing my rule? If the tragic state of the tribe can't be improved, then it's meaningless for anyone to be the great chieftain. Standing in the great hall of the chieftain and looking out through the window, most of Orgrimmar was moaning in the ashes. Even though Thrall had used his power to suppress all the violent fire elementals, more and more scattered fire elementals still managed to invade Orgrimmar during the elemental disaster, bringing even more destruction to Orgrimmar. By the time Varrock and the other Horde bandits had killed all the Twilight believers, half of Orgrimmar had been destroyed. What made the tribe leaders even more depressed was that the entire territory of the tribe had been hit by the elemental disaster, and even more serious, the cataclysm. The Nushui River, which separated Duroder and the Barren Land, swelled due to tectonic movements and flooded a large area in the central and western part of Duroder. It became the Nushui River Basin, which was divided by crisscrossed pools. A terrifying trail of lava cut through the barren lands from the northwest to the southeast. Now, that place was called Great Rift Valley. The southwest of the Stoneclaw Mountain area was originally under the control of the tribe. A sudden volcanic eruption completely destroyed an important town there, and more than 5,000 people lost their lives. Now, it had been renamed Coal Valley. The Thousand Needles and the Flashing Plains were flooded. At least, most of the areas in the Thousand Needles were controlled by the tribe. Those were the simple losses from the disaster. What happened next was the real headache. The desolate land, which was conquered by the traditional orcs who migrated from Galan and Nagrand. The originally barren wilderness was gradually brought under the jurisdiction of the tribe. Even if Gruul didn't listen to orders, it was still under the control of the tribe. The cataclysm changed the landscape there, and a new green basin was born in the center of the desolate land. The unexplainable crustal changes and the transfer of life energy made the barren land there suddenly green. The trees inside grew wildly. This attracted the attention of the Cenarian Circle. The Night Elf Druids of Fandral Staghelm and the Tauran of Thunder Bluff both chose to settle there, which undoubtedly increased the territorial conflict. In turn, because Thrall sought to solve the problem through dialogue, this angered Gruul. The demigod behemoth was extremely irritable. He felt that his dignity had been insulted. On the other hand, Thrall's protest against the alliance was met with difficulties. Duque had indeed sent a stern inquiry to Darnassus, asking why Fandral led the army into the territory of the tribe without the approval of the alliance. Fandral was a member of the Cenarian Circle and prided himself on his status. He believed that all forests and green lands should be under the jurisdiction of the Cenarian Circle, especially the new green lands. Thus, he flatly refused the Alliance's mediation. But could things like identity and race be so easily separated? They were druids, yes, but the problem was that they were night elves first, and then druids. Tyrande almost went crazy with anger. If you're not a night elf, you don't have to look to the Alliance for support. Tyrande was also angry. This undoubtedly deepened the existing conflict between the Alliance and the tribe. After all, in Northren's northern expedition, the tribe had lost more than 250,000 troops. However, because the tribe had retreated before they attacked the Icecrown Fortress, they didn't get any benefits from the Icecrown Fortress. The radical beastmen, led by Gurus, felt that the tribe had paid a huge sacrifice for nothing. This was unreasonable, and strongly demanded that the Northwind Tundra of Northren be part of the tribe's territory. Duque didn't express his opinion on this. This time, it was Kalego's turn. As the new Dragon King of the Blue Dragons, Kalegos might be a scumbag, but he wasn't careless when it came to the interests of the tribe. He directly announced that the Northwind Tundra had been the hunting ground of the Blue Dragons since ancient times, and that the Warsong Beastman deserved to be slaughtered by Maligo's subordinates. If the tribe intended to occupy the Northwind Tundra, it would be seen as a declaration of war against the Blue Dragons. The five-colored dragons were of the same breath. Now that the Blue Dragons had set things right, Alexstrasza directly came out to support Kalegos. She also announced to the tribe that if the tribe wanted to occupy the Northwind Tundra, the Dragon Slumber Temple would not sit idly by. This time, Gurus was completely deflated. He shamelessly asked Thrall to ask Duque for the Grizzly Hills. In the end, before they could even negotiate with the Alliance, Thrall rejected him. The attack on the Grizzly Hills was basically handled by the main force of Stormwind, led by Varian. Even if it was incorporated as territory, Stormwind would have priority. Chapter 1761. The Horde didn't have the strength to threaten the Alliance, let alone their position. As a great leader, Sal's charisma was unquestionable. He abided by his principles and couldn't bring himself to ask Duque for territory, especially on the Eastern Front where the Horde didn't participate. Being principled was Sal's strength, but it was also Sal's weakness. If he was more ambitious, the Horde might be more aggressive and have a wider territory than it was now. Conversely, Duque wouldn't have allowed the Horde to exist until now. After receiving news of the Horde's internal strife, Jaina immediately went to find Duque through the portal. How will the Alliance deal with it? Theramore is already under martial law. In this life, Jaina didn't have any sympathy for the orcs because Duque deliberately tricked her when she was young. It was even more impossible for her to have an unclear relationship with Sal like in history. If Theramore had been established for her own cause, after she became Queen of Bakur Tiras and moved the focus of Bakur Tiras to Hidden Treasure Bay under Duque's suggestion, Theramore's position changed. Now, Theramore was not only a window of communication between the Alliance and the Horde, but also a bridgehead for the Alliance to invade the Horde's territory when necessary. Apart from retaining the necessary functions of military logistics and a trading port, Theramore was purely a stronghold. Faced with Jaina's question, Duque smiled and shook his head. The Horde's current conflict is just the inevitable result of their expansion being suppressed. In fact, solving the conflict is very simple. As long as there is enough territory to settle the excess orcs who migrate from Nagrand and let them live and develop, then nothing will happen. Jaina immediately understood Duque's position. Her pretty face was full of cold sneers. If the Horde's territory is not enough, the Alliance has the obligation to fight for new territory for them? If it's not enough, do we have to cut our own flesh and feed it to these green-skinned creatures? After all, they were the leaders of the Alliance, not the chiefs of the Horde. How could they do something stupid and give away their own territory just for the survival needs of the Horde radicals and their endless greed for territory? It could be said that 15 years after the Beast Men arrived at the Kalimdor continent, Duque had been secretly restricting the development of the Beast Men, and it had finally paid off. Duque's plan was very big, and no one in the tribe noticed. By the time Sal and the others found out, the Alliance had already stopped the development of the tribe. In the Kalimdor continent, there were many ownerless lands. Whoever could occupy it first and stabilize it would develop well. Moreover, Duque and Sar both knew that if Azeroth hadn't been threatened by so many evil forces, the Alliance and the Horde would have already started a war. Since there was no way to start a war, the game between the Alliance and the Horde would be reflected in their own development. The tribe's population was small, and their economic foundation was even worse. They were destined to need to develop at a faster pace in order to obtain strength that was close to that of the Alliance. The original history was that the Lordaeron continent was completely destroyed, and the Alliance's strength was greatly reduced. The Horde took the opportunity to catch up. Duque's appearance not only saved the Lordaeron continent, but even revived the three destroyed kingdoms of Lordaeron, Alterac, and Stromgarde. Coupled with all kinds of black technology and economic policies that transcended the era, the Alliance's economic strength and military strength were far above the Horde's after 10 years. That made Sal even more afraid to start a war. However, the situation had now changed. The influx of more than 2 million orcs from Draenor had indeed greatly increased the population of the Horde, but it had also brought a heavy burden to the people's livelihood. The continuous natural disasters, as well as the Calamity Army and other dark forces causing trouble, made the orcs who had escaped the destruction of Draenor feel like they had just escaped the tiger's den and entered the wolf's den. When the cataclysm broke out, the internal contradictions that had been accumulating for a long time were finally fully exposed. Orgrimmar, and even the entire Horde, were now like a powder keg. With just a little spark, there would be a big explosion that would blow the Horde into pieces. Does Sal dare to lead the Horde to war with the Alliance? Jaina asked. Duque shook his head. It's precisely because Sal is rational and is the orc who knows the Alliance the best in the entire Horde that he doesn't dare. On the contrary, ignorance and recklessness make him fearless. Jaina immediately understood what Duque meant, and the sarcasm on her face intensified. Those orcs whose brains are still stuck in the prehistoric era really think that the Alliance is the sparsely populated Draenei? Traditional orcs were extremely barbaric. If they were unhappy, they would fight. If they were unhappy, they would fight. Anyway, they would fight for territory every day. How could there be no deaths? If they lost, they would admit defeat. If the other party did not let them go, they would simply exterminate the Horde. Over thousands of years, countless clans had disappeared in the long river of history, and countless ambitious orcs had become independent from the old clans and created new ones. Back then, the orcs had established the old Horde, launched a war against the Draenei, and won. In fact, there were several important reasons. First, the absolute value of the population was disproportionate. Before Draenor was destroyed, the Horde had a population of at least tens of millions. And the Draenei were automatically chased by Jaden's Burning Legion, and had never exceeded 1 million. The Draenei had lost too much technology, and only had holy light magic left. This allowed the Horde's population advantage to play a role. In addition, Jaden had given Dan evil magic and nurtured a large number of warlocks among the orcs, which largely offset the advantage of the holy light. And now? The Alliance had popularized modern weapons on Earth with TNT explosives as the core, and there was also the magical black technology of the flying fortress and flying battleship. Not to mention that the Horde had less than 3 million people, unless all the warriors in the Horde were professionals who had stepped into the hero realm. Even if there were 10 times this number, they would not be a match for modern artillery. Was it so easy to produce a hero realm expert? Including the morning-level mages, at most, whether it was the Horde or the Alliance, they could only reach 4 digits. After hearing Jaina's words, Duque also sneered. If you want to destroy someone, you must first make them crazy. The Horde is already a crazy train heading towards hell. No matter what Sal does, it will only delay the speed of their descent into hell. If we don't fundamentally remove the influence of the traditional orcs, the Horde is destined to be destroyed. As Duque concluded this, Sal, who was in Orgrimmar, turned his head and pointed at a stack of documents. Do you see this? Even the Horde's reports for recording important events use the Alliance's paper. Do you really think that the Alliance's lead over us is in a single area? No. That's an all-round backwardness. Unfortunately, many little bastards think that even if these technologies are really useful, as long as we defeat the Alliance, we can get all the Alliance's technologies. Varric's voice was full of bitterness. Chapter 1762. Ridiculous. Is the technology of the Alliance so easy to steal? The one who spoke was the boss of the Goblin Rustwater conglomerate, the Prince of Trade. Sal never really believed this despicable goblin. Garavex became the king of trade by exploding, selling out his goods, or betraying everyone he knew. When Calero Volcano erupted, only Garavex had a refugee ship. He charged every refugee their life savings as a fee. Then he packed up every goblin in the upper class like sausages, ready to sell them as slaves. The monster like Garavex betrayed all his people for more almond coins. During the Second Dark Portal War, he became the chairman of the Copper Street Joint Venture, a consultant of the Tinkerers Alliance, an important goblin in the Trade Alliance, and the second richest person in the Rustwater conglomerate. He called himself, after a few months of plotting, he killed the former king of trade Marty at a banquet. Through various pretenses and small businesses, he owned most of the former's property in the Trade Alliance, stole the land under his name, and finally became the new king of trade. If the Alliance hadn't ruined all of this despicable guy's businesses and sealed off all his bloody ways to make money in the Alliance, he probably wouldn't have become the Alliance's mortal enemy and turned to the Horde. In fact, although Sal disdained to steal the technology of the Alliance, he never stopped Garavex from sending people to steal technology from the Alliance. Unfortunately, corpses hung from the walls of the Alliance's factories and research institutes from time to time, as well as Garavex's temper every once in a while, proved that the Goblin leader's plans had failed again and again. Duque had set up the magic net in every new technology research and development center and every major factory in the Alliance. Those soul guards who never needed to sleep monitored every corner of every important place in the Alliance through the magic net. Except for no more than 20 gnome craftsmen, including Gerben, no one in the entire Alliance had a complete set of new technology. The most frightening thing was that the greatest inventor and leader of the Alliance's new technology happened to be Duke Marcus himself. If it was someone else, they might be able to cut off the Alliance's momentum through abduction or even assassination. But this scummy goblin leader would never be able to deal with a real demigod of Azeroth. The Alliance could export a lot of products to the Horde, but they would not export any new technology that was close to the forefront of the Alliance's technology. The gnomes, with their vile personalities, only had the ability to steal and modify. When it came to research and development, the gnomes were far superior to the gnomes. For example, the flying battleships. Until now, the gnomes had yet to create a flying battleship that could fly for 100 hours without any accidents. The Alliance had already begun to develop the third-generation propeller and Titan anti-gravity hybrid flying battleships. Anyone with a brain would feel despair at this gap. However, the group of Nagalan orcs, who only had cold weapons in their minds and were close to primitive people, still had fanatical confidence. They firmly believed that if there was anything that one person couldn't solve, it could definitely be solved with 10,000 people. If they couldn't win, it was only because they didn't have enough determination and not enough people had died. Of course, in theory, once they started a war with the Alliance, as long as they used up the Alliance's ammunition with human lives, they could drag the Alliance into hand-to-hand combat, which the Beastmen were best at. But, was this possible? Coincidentally, at this critical juncture, the traditional orcs, who were the mainstream of the tribe, issued the strongest voice of resistance so far. If they didn't do anything, this sound would soon become the only melody in the tribe. Sal felt a sense of sorrow that suffocated him. At this moment, a messenger came, followed by a group of soldiers, each soldier holding a thick stack of report envelopes in his hand. Each envelope was marked with a blood-colored feather that represented urgency. Sal's heart sank. The changes in geological conditions that had occurred in various places due to the catastrophe were the results of the Wyvern Scouts' inspections. And these reports were the tribe's losses. Even if he didn't want to think about it, he knew that this was only the first wave. Put it down. Sal ordered a little dispiritedly. Sal, Wujin, and even Varrock sat down together and read each report as quickly as possible. They marked the losses on the sand table map of the chieftain's hall. After half a day, the result was shocking. Since the day of the catastrophe, more than 100,000 tribespeople had died. Some died in the disaster, and more than 70% died under the raging elementals. There were reports of patrols and garrisons being attacked everywhere, but with the weapons in the hands of the orcs, it was difficult to cause any effective damage to the fire elemental creatures. The shaman was simply in short supply. Sal finally made a decision to convene a small meeting of the leaders. The participants included the troll leader Wujin, the Tauren chief Kane, the forgotten leader Dranish, the prince of trade Garavix, Sal's advisor, the old orc warrior Eitrig, and Gurus Hellscream. I think everyone knows what has happened to the tribe recently. Sal opened the meeting first. Gurus crossed his arms over his chest, his face full of displeasure. I know. The territory we conquered in the north was shamelessly stolen. The Alliance refused to share the spoils of war with the tribe. And the damn black lizard, Nesario, because of his personal hatred with the Dragon Guardian and the Alliance, launched a revenge on the entire planet, implicating the tribe. Wujin couldn't help but say, "Young man, don't talk nonsense. The evil ancient gods have never stopped conspiring to destroy the world. Whether there is an alliance or not in this world, it will still." Sal interrupted the troll chief. "Forget it, Wujin, we have more important things to deal with." Dworkin gave Garush a death stare and finally fell silent. Gurus snorted coldly and didn't even look at Wujin. Their behavior gave Sal a big headache. However, Sal forcefully pulled the topic back. The serious problem we are facing now cannot be solved by swords and axes alone. The earthquake shook every piece of land, and the elemental creatures wreaked havoc in the countryside. I heard our planet Azeroth screaming in pain. If we don't solve this worldwide disaster, not to mention the Alliance tribe, all the creatures on this planet will be finished. This topic was so heavy that even someone as arrogant as Garrush fell silent. Sal continued, "My spies have just received news that Magni Bronzebeard, the Bronzebeard king of the Iron Furnace Fort, decisively turned himself into a diamond man through the earth slate in order to pursue the power of a demigod. I think it is time for the tribe to make sacrifices and concessions." Chapter 1763. Sacrifice and Concessions? Almost as soon as they heard these two words, Kane and Wujin jumped up. "Great Chieftain, wait. Great Chieftain, you can't be," Sal waved his hand, "don't get excited, sit down." His fierce order forced the two chieftains to sit down obediently. In the conference room, everyone pricked up their ears. "Yes, I am indeed going to follow Magni Bronzebeard's example and pursue the power of a demigod. In fact, my strength has long reached a bottleneck. As long as I take advantage of the time when the will of Azeroth asks for help to fight, I still have a good chance of success. Think about it, a real demigod, what that means to the tribe. Cain and Wuxia were all silent. The tribe was suppressed by the alliance, of course, because of the economy, technology, and military fields. The key was the lack of high-end combat power. Gruul, the king of Galan, could not be a match for the demigods of the alliance. After all, Gruul was only a demigod, not a real demigod. If the alliance and the tribe fought, Gruul would never be able to hold on, and he would run away or change sides in minutes. If the tribe could have a real demigod, at least in terms of high-end combat power, it would be possible to compete with the alliance. Even if they could not be on an equal footing with the alliance, they would at least have the power to resist. Everyone knew that Sal was very strong. Perhaps he was not the strongest warrior, nor was he the strongest mage, but in terms of overall combat power, he was one of the best in the tribe. He had not been able to be promoted to a demigod, and he was also dragged down by the tribe's chores. Sal had no distractions and focused on becoming a demigod. With the will of Azeroth asking for help everywhere, there was a good chance for Sal to pass. Timing was something that could not be missed in minutes. Sal was a dual shaman of enhancement and elemental attributes. If he became a demigod, it would also be very helpful in suppressing the elemental disaster of Azeroth. In addition, the wise Wuxia also thought that if for this reason, Sal stepped down from the position of the chieftain of the tribe, it would also be politically a step back. Not only could it avoid the difficulties and accusations of the traditional orcs against Sal, but it could also let the mainstream traditional young orcs try. If it didn't work out, Sal, who had become a demigod, could still come back to preside over the situation. Just like Duke Marcus, the leader of the alliance, Duque had disappeared more than once, but as long as there was an effective ruling team, the alliance would not fall into chaos. When he returned as a demigod and regained control of the alliance with the aura of a king, the alliance soared again and again. So Sal becoming a demigod was definitely beneficial to the tribe. Now came the problem. If Sal wanted to advance, it would definitely take a long time. Leaving a power vacuum was the stupidest thing to do. Then, who would be suitable to be the next great chieftain? Woken swept his gaze across the audience and suddenly thought of a terrible possibility. Wuxia hurriedly asked, "Great Chief, what are you going to do? Although our world is collapsing every day, and we've evacuated most of our people there are still 2/3 of Nagrand left. I plan to use the dark portal to return to Nagrand and ask my grandmother, who refuses to leave Nagrand, and the elementals there for help." "How long?" Cain asked. "A few weeks, a few months, or even a year. I don't know how long an elemental demigod would need. After all, this is a completely unknown field. After all, as far as I know, several demigods in the alliance are promoted at different times." The air was once again filled with silence. The tribe cannot be without a leader for a day. Sal emphasized, "Since everyone has no objection to me going to the demigod position, then let's discuss it. Who is the most suitable to be the next great chief of the tribe?" Although it was a discussion and recommendation, it was actually the art of politics. The tribe was first established by the orcs, and at this moment, the largest force in the entire tribe was still the orcs. Whether it was population, combat power, or political influence, the orcs had an absolute advantage. In this political situation, Sal actually had no choice. After a few hypocritical excuses, Thrall finally appointed Gurus Hellscream as the next great chieftain. "Gurus, I'll leave the tribe to you. Unfortunately, because your battle record is not too impressive, I hope that you can launch a Makegara after I announce my abdication, so that all the chiefs who are interested in the position of the great chief can challenge you fairly." "I am deeply honored. Great chieftain, I bet on the name of Gurus Hellscream that I will not lose to any orc in Makra." The chiefs of the other races all noticed that Garush only mentioned the beast men. Sal patted Gurus on the shoulder and sighed in his heart. He also knew that Garush was too impulsive and was not a suitable great chieftain. However, he represented the traditional faction, the largest force among the orcs. Secondly, among the younger generation, there was really no other candidate other than him. It was like picking the tallest person among the shortest. It was like trying everything in a desperate situation. Sal was still worried and instructed, "I know you are not ready to be a great chief, but I think Wajin, Kane, and Eitrig will give you a lot of useful advice," Garush interrupted Thrall. "No. I think I am ready. Moreover, no matter how many suggestions there are, isn't the final decision still made by the great chief himself? I think I have the vision to lead the tribe to prosperity." Sal choked on the spot, and even the corners of his eyes twitched. In the end, thousands of words turned into a long sigh, and he lamented in his heart, "As long as Garrus doesn't destroy the tribe," this was helplessness, and it was almost the only choice in a desperate situation. Without saying anything more, Sal patted Garush's shoulder hard, which could be considered a form of encouragement. The news of Sal's resignation as great chief was also sent to Duque's desk at once. Everyone knew that the so-called Michaela was just a formality. Among the tribe's peers, no one would be able to defeat Garrus. Without waiting for Duque to be nervous, the other alliance leaders quickly made a proposal. An online throne meeting was immediately held. They were all old faces, and the only difference was that Muradin replaced his elder brother and appeared in the illusory projection. "What do you think about Garrus Hellscream becoming the new great chief of the tribe?" Duque asked. "What the hell? That guy has a screw loose." Muradin was the first to complain, "I've had enough of this guy in the Northwind Tundra. How stupid is the tribe to elect such a great chief?" The leaders of the alliance quickly reached a consensus after talking for a while. "Well, since everyone is of the same opinion, from the day Sal entered the dark portal, the alliance will officially launch a cold war against the tribe." You're tuning into the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.